To move anything here. Good. Why don't you hold that for a moment? Yeah, I might need a little technical help for that. Hello.
Hi.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm good. Okay.
Jeff Mackler.
Larry Rubin, the big Larry Rubin. How are you?
The young Larry Rubin.
The young Larry Rubin.
I never thanked you for your apartment.
All right.
Heights.
If you'll all settle down here, we'll get started on our first panel of the weekend here. It's now, yeah, okay. I just need to be closer, I guess. Okay, so welcome to our first panel of this weekend. We're focused on student activism, and when I went out to look for people, clearly Antioch has, a tremendous history of activists, and I've found 4 individuals who I think have not only were active when they were here at Antioch, but also pretty much devoted their lives to progressive causes going forward through the rest of their life to where they are today. And I think they're great examples that I referred to at dinner last night of, what Antioch students can do once they graduate and get out into the world. So I'm going to introduce them one by one, and we'll let them tell you their stories. And I asked them to talk a little bit about what their activism was here when they were on campus, and also what they've done after they left. And I think you'll find them fairly inspiring stories that I have. And I actually, asked them basically to talk about how their life was here and how that influenced them going forward. So just quickly, I can run around the panels here. I have Jeff Mackler, who's the earliest. He'll be a graduate from 63. Larry Rubin, there, from 65. Wendy here, who was the class of 68. And Jeff Jones, who actually didn't complete Antioch, but went on to quite a history. So he's a welcome panelist for here. So let me talk about Jeff for a minute, and then I'll let him tell you his story. Jeff was an early organizer of protests at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base before I even protested there, when the peace movement was in full gear, and they were looking to basically highlight Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as a strategic air command base and nuclear weapons. And so it was pretty much the anti-nuclear group. He was president when he was here of the Antioch Peace Group. And after graduation, he was on the committee for the National Peace Action Coalition. He's currently on the steering committee of the United National Anti-War Coalition. And he's the current national secretary of the Socialist Action Party. And he was its presidential candidate in 2016 and 2020. So Jeff, the podium is yours.
Well, first, how wonderful it is.
And I think you're muted here.
And to see old friends like Larry Rubin. We spent many hours doing good things at Antioch.
Hang on, we're trying to find a sound bite for you here.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Jeff is in Oakland.
Jeff is in Oakland. Larry is in the Midwest here somewhere.
Mississippi.
And the other Jeff is in New York. So we're spread across the continent.
Can you hear me?
Just so you know, we can hear you online.
Is there a way to unmute everybody here? You're working on it? Okay. Thank you. So Larry and I trial ran this yesterday and it seemed to work fine. Now they can hear us. All right, now why don't you all three talk and let me see if I can hear any of you here.
Howdy, hello, from Mississippi.
There's my man. All right. Jeff, try again.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We're good. All right.
Yes.
Now the podium is yours.
Okay, is it my turn?
Yeah.
And David, tell us how much time you want our presentation to be.
You can give me 10 minutes. I think that'll be good.
Okay. My first day on campus, I won a contest at Antioch in Corey Hall for fly swatting. I organized it, and I swatted more flies than anyone else. And lo and behold, one of our hallmates, Offie Wortham, walked in and said that he just tried to get a haircut downtown on Xenia Avenue at Gegner's, and Mr. Gegner refused and called him a nigger. And I, of course, who was the constitutional expert, said, well, that's illegal. It says in the Constitution of the United States that a barber has to cut everybody's hair. And people said, are you sure that's in the Constitution, Jeff? I said, I'm absolutely certain. And then they said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I'm going to tell Mr. Gegner. And I walked down 5 minutes away to the barber shop. And I told Mr. Gegner, Louis Gegner, that he was violating the Constitution of the United States. He asked my name, and then he said, get your nigger-loving kike ass out of my fucking barber shop. He sort of kicked me into the movement, so to speak. And I went to the first meeting on campus the next day of the NAACP. We had, believe it or not, 700 members, and it was the largest chapter in the country. And it was headed by Eleanor Norton Holmes. Ellie Holmes, we called her, who became a congressman for Washington. And she swore that she would not graduate Antioch until Gegner's was desegregated. Well, needless to say, we embarked on a 5-year battle to desegregate that barber shop. And every time we had a mass meeting, and we had hundreds of students in the NAACP, it would go on for weeks of voting until the administration would finally convince us that we should use other channels than a sit-in. And if we sat in, we would be arrested. It would affect our getting into graduate school. And so we filed the lawsuit and we won. And the court fined Mr. Gegner $1 suspended court fees for segregating. He appealed that to the Ohio Supreme Court, who ruled, these are years of legal battles, that cutting a black man's hair was a new skill and that Gegner got his dollar back. We had protests, we talked to the mayor, we asked the city council to pass resolutions until finally, in 1963, after 5 years of efforts, we decided to vote for a sit-in. And the NAACP, which was only for legal action, told us that they wouldn't support it. We quit the NAACP, the largest chapter in the country with 800 members or 7. And we formed the Antioch Committee for Racial Equality, which was affiliated with SNCC. We set in the barbershop 700 strong. 700 of us were arrested in rotating form. We occupied 13 barber chairs, and Afi walked in first, and Gegner said, "We don't cut niggers' hair," and they arrested him. "What do you want, Mackler?" they said. And I said, "I want a haircut," but Afi was first. And they arrested me, took me to jail in Xenia, and charged me with inciting to riot with force and violence. The Quakers, which were very strong, defended me, and 5 years later I won my lawsuit, but not before I was kept out of graduate school, rejected to 13 law schools. So it was an exciting time. We only had a handful, perhaps a dozen blacks on campus, but campus was quite a fascinating place, and I want to describe that. I was housed in Corey Hall. Louis Corey was a founding member of the Communist Party. Antioch was one of the few who, during the witch hunt, refused to fire professors who were charged with communism. Antioch had a strong tradition of civil liberties. We formed the Antioch Committee to abolish the House Committee on Un-American Activities. And a few right-wingers formed the Antioch Committee to abolish the Antioch Committee to abolish HUAC. So we turned around, I think Larry was part of it, and we formed the Antioch Committee to abolish the Antioch Committee to abolish the Antioch Committee to abolish HUAC. It was called ACA-HUAC, ACA-HUAC, and so on. We formed the chapter, the Student Peace Group, and we met at the Quaker Meeting Hall. We organized demonstrations around Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. At first, we marched the 9-mile diameter of total destruction if there were to be nuclear war. And that didn't stop nuclear war. So we did we started with the radius, we went to the diameter, and then we had a huge march around the circumference, something like 27 miles. And they continued. We formed the Student Peace Union in Antioch, which had the first national conference of 800 students from around the United States. And we debated and debated. We had a wonderful tradition of debate in Antioch. My roommate was Peter Irons, who with me turned in his draft card and went to jail. I turned in my draft card, and then Peter saw me at 3 o'clock in the morning taping it together again. I decided that I didn't want to go to jail, but Peter went to jail for 4 years, not one day off. He went back to Antioch and graduated. His father was died of radiation and was a member of the Manhattan Project, which worked on the atomic bomb. Peter went back to Antioch, graduated with Howard Zinn at Boston University, went to Harvard and graduated from Harvard Law School, filed a suit against his illegal arrest and imprisonment, got a pardon and an apology from the President of the United States, went on to file against the United States government for Japanese internment, wrote a 1,000-page book and led the legal suit that overturned the internment of the Japanese during World War II. He was a magnificent roommate. Another hallmate of mine was Stephen Jay Gould. We went to high school together. Stephen and I used to give competing lectures, me for a mass crowd of 20 people to defend the Cuban Revolution, and Stephen Jay Gould on the sex life of a clam. Steve became the world's leading evolutionary biologist. He taught at Harvard, and he remained a friend and offered my party the right to publish all of his books. So we had a lot of wonderful people. Joni Rabinowitz was one of the activists there. Her father was Victor Rabinowitz, who with Leonard Boudin, Victor Rabinowitz, and Arthur Schutzer started the Emergency Civil Liberties Committee, which was a national committee that defended victims of the McCarthyite witch hunt, who the ACLU refused to defend. I later met Victor in court. He argued more cases before Leonard Boudin than any other lawyer in history. And he took a case that we filed when we were in the SWP, when the government admitted that they had sent 1,100 spies into our party, at that time, the Socialist Workers' Party. We filed a COINTELPRO suit against the government, got thousands of organizations, and became the first group in America to win, with an apology from the government, a fine, and an admission that the government had no right to send spies into our party. 10 years earlier, the government arrested the entire leadership of the Socialist Workers' Party on the eve of World War II and put them in jail because they had Marxist literature. So Antioch was a wonderful, rich experience. I went there as a 164-pound, young, wiry, strong athlete that could dunk basketballs and was eager to compete against the national champion, Ohio State. And sure enough, Antioch didn't have any basketball teams other than intramural teams. But I met young people from all over the country who were interested in social justice, whose parents, like Peter's, were active against nuclear weapons. Stephen Jay Gould's parents, like mine, came from the Communist Party, but they refused to tell us because they figured that their blabbermouth kids would get them fired for their jobs. After my first experience at Antioch, I decided to become a nuclear pacifist, went home and told my parents I was going to be a conscientious objector. And my father said, conscientious objector, why not a communist? And I started running around the house and I said, Daddy, are you a communist? Your father is a communist. And my mother chimed in, your mother too. Antioch had a rich political life. We were debating always between kids who came from Communist Party, Stalinist backgrounds, Social Democrats, and Trotskyists. It was there that I first ran into the Trotskyist movement, who defended civil liberties and democratic rights, and a democratic, inclusive anti-war movement. I graduated in Antioch and went to graduate school in Buffalo, where I became the head of the Buffalo Committee to abolish HUAC. Buffalo held hearings, HUAC held hearings across the United States, charging communist professors with communist ideas and demanding that they name names. They refused and many went to jail. Antioch regularly had these type of people visit us. Frank Wilkinson, Willard Uphouse, and others regularly visited Antioch, and they were charged and called before the House Committee or the local state committee to name names, and when they refused, they went to jail, sometimes for a year or two. Antioch welcomed them over and over, Carl Braden, Willard Uphouse, and so on. After I graduated, I became a socialist and joined the Young Socialist Alliance. I spent 10 years fighting against the war in Vietnam and was one of the founders of the It was the National Anti-War Coalition that mobilized millions against the war. When we started mobilizing against the war at the height of the witch hunt, the polls showed that some 13% of the American people were opposed to the war and the rest supported it. By the time we were finished, we had organized massive democratic, united, inclusive demonstrations that had millions, and the polls showed that 78% of the American people were against the war. So we played a major role in the anti-war movement. I became a leader of the teachers union in New York and was elected to be the state vice president of the California Federation of Teachers and an organizer for the Hayward Federation of Teachers and a delegate to the Central Labor Council. I am currently on the National Steering Committee of Julian Assange's defense. Julian Assange was the founder of WikiLeaks, who released the Iraq war logs, and who, like Daniel Ellsberg, who died last week, was persecuted because he told the truth and horror of US wars. I am the founder and director of the Mobilization to Free Mumia Abu Jamal. He's a Black innocent political prisoner in Philadelphia who has been in jail, most of it on death row, an innocent man framed up for murder by the racist Philadelphia Police Department. He's been in jail for 40 years. I'm a founder of the Northern California Climate Mobilization. We organize tens of thousands of people to protest global warming, perhaps the first. Can I take another minute and wrap it up, Dave?
Yes, you can have another minute.
Okay. So I learned about politics and humanity and love for people and good humor and goodwill from Antioch. J.D. Dawson went to jail at Xenia and bailed me out with a fund of $50. The Quakers defended us. And after I graduated, young people a year or so later, like Larry Rubin, led mass protests down Xenia Avenue with students from Central State and Wilberforce, two Black land-grant colleges 9 miles away, that marched downtown and were prevented from doing so, but Gegner refused to cut. Gegner closed his barbershop and we desegregated. I was taken out of jail and out of my apartment and put back in the dorm under security because the Klan threatened to kill me. We had a vibrant life at Antioch. We were ranked 9th in the country for liberal arts colleges by the Ford Foundation. We had a magnificent science department headed by people like Ali Loud, who ran for governor of the state of Ohio on the Progressive Party ticket in the 1940s. Our professors were progressive and fine teachers. Benjamin Spock's son, Mike Spock, was one of our students there. We had a vibrant political life of constant debate and very little acrimony. We differed, but we debated it out and we decided what to do. And sometimes we backed off and sometimes we moved forward. I cherish the years I spent at Antioch and the good friends that I made there. And I appreciate the effort of David Southern and others to get us back together. It's 60 years since I graduated and 65 years since I walked in a Gegner's barbershop. I've maintained that commitment to democratic and human rights ever since. I was arrested 9 times in civil rights demonstrations across the United States. I ran for president of the United States against Obama and Trump. You may know that I lost those elections. But I spoke to young people across the country. I've written 25 books and pamphlets, all of them in the tradition of open inquiry, honesty, and telling the truth about the racist imperialist policy of the United States. I send you the greatest feelings of love and admiration for Antioch and for the wonderful student activists who followed our tradition.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, now you see what I was talking about last night? His bio doesn't give justice to all of this, right? Totally. All right, our second speaker is Larry Rubin, who graduated 2 years after Jeff. While at Antioch, Larry worked for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Some of you may have heard of that. In Mississippi and Georgia, talk about a challenge. He served as the National Education Director for the National Student Association until he found out that the CIA was funding their activities overseas, at which point he resigned in protest. He was a reporter for the Daily Dayton News and spent a long time doing journalism and writing. He's worked in various public relations and writer roles with the United Electrical Radio and Machine Workers Union and the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. He's been a member of the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee and the New Jewish Agenda. And I'm sure I haven't done justice to your bio either. So you may take the podium and help us out here.
Thank you very much. I have to say, it's hard for me to express what it's like to be with Jeff after all these years. He was a great influence on me. And actually, I lived in his apartment. He gave me and my wife at the time his apartment when he moved to San Francisco. And I've been always grateful for that. I would actually love to talk about what I am doing today. I am talking to you from Mississippi, from Holly Springs, Mississippi, which is where I worked for SNCC when I dropped out of Antioch. At least I thought I dropped out. Turned out I didn't. Turned out I was on co-op job when I returned. They wouldn't let me drop out. Tried to drop out. Also, I owed them some co-op credits, and money for that. But anyway, in a way, I've never left Antioch, being here in Holly Springs. And I would love to talk about what I'm doing now. It's voter rights work. I was appointed by the Marshall County as a voting official. Marshall County is majority Black. And years ago, I never thought I would say those words. I'm a Mississippi voting official. Also, I'm working on Medicaid expansion and on turning this area, which is 85% Black, into an area of Black culture and history open to everybody. I'd love to talk more about that, but my assignment from David, as he said, was to talk about what Antioch meant to us, the role that Antioch played in our lives. And so I'm going to leave Mississippi a moment and go back to 1959, when a buddy of mine, Rachel Markin, and I hitchhiked to Antioch from Philadelphia. And we met with Fressa B. Inman, the registrar. And we didn't so much apply for admission as for asylum from the McCarthy period. As Jeff said, and my parents also were in the Communist Party, and so was Ray's. And at school, in fact, our whole lives, we were really victims. We knew we were communists, or at least we knew we were different. Like Jeff said, our parents try to hide this from us a bit to protect us. But when you turn on the television and you see all these shows about how the communists are out to get us and they're evil, and I led 3 lives and all this, and we knew that was us. In some kind of way, the world thought our country thought we were evil. So we heard about Antioch. And we hitchhiked and we explained our situation, and we gained early admission. We were told early acceptance, not early admission. We were told if we finished our 12th grade and didn't flunk out, we could come to Antioch. Now, I have to tell you, we didn't know we were activists We didn't know that word, activists. We just knew the country was out to get us. And at Antioch, we would be free to talk about whatever we wanted to talk about. We didn't go to Antioch because Antioch was an activist place. Didn't know that word, actually. We went to Antioch because we knew Antioch was a safe place for us, that we could be us at Antioch. And that's an important distinction because when the university closed or tried to close Antioch, they said that they would continue the activist tradition of Antioch at this university. But what they meant was they would teach largely online about peace, about activist subjects. They would be they would teach progressive subjects. But Antioch was more than that. Antioch was a total environment in which everybody could express themselves and everybody could be themselves. We were a community of scholars. We didn't have student government. We had community government. We were treated not by the college, not in loco parentis. That is not the college taking the place of our parents, but we were treated as adults. This is what Antioch offered, and still does. And I'm very proud of that. Anyway, so we hitchhiked to Antioch, and we asked for asylum, and we were granted it a year in advance. But it turns out, not because of our story of being victimized by the McCarthy period, but because we took the initiative to hitchhike. That's what impressed Fressa B. Inman. We hitchhiked there. And that actually followed the Antioch tradition of entrepreneurship. Arthur Morgan's, his contribution to the Antioch philosophy was what he called the third way. Different from capitalism or socialism, he had the idea of small entrepreneurship, which meant taking initiative in his mind. I'm not commenting on whether this is a sustainable philosophy, but that's what impressed Fressa B. He hitchhiked. Again, I didn't exactly know I was an activist. I came to Antioch, and Steve Gould got me involved in the NAACP. And I think eventually I became president. Then I was chair of ACRE that Jeff spoke about. In fact, I told Steve, I said, well, Steve, why are you messing around with these shells? What kind of crap is that? You know, we got to fight for the revolution. You know, what are you messing? I didn't know he was a genius. And as Jeff said, he would become the leading evolutionary scientist in the country. They were just messing around with shells. I was wrong. I was wrong about a lot of things. The first year at Antioch, I found myself in Cuba. Jeff already mentioned Jody Rabinowitz and her father, Victor Rabinowitz. Victor and his law firm were the attorneys for Fidel Castro in the United States. And they arranged for a group. Jeff, I don't know if did you go to Cuba with us? You did. Steve Martino did, you know, a lot of folks. We were the last group, the Antioch group was the last group to go to Cuba totally legally. We flew from Key West for $5 on Air Cubano Airlines. We were in Cuba, the Antioch group was, when the United States broke relations with Cuba. And it was a question of whether the State Department would let us back into the country. They did, but we couldn't have gotten on a plane and returned to Cuba. That to me was part of Antioch. And it was the part that Antioch allowed that to happen in its environment. I got active in the NAACP. When I was chair of ACRE, Jeff mentioned demonstrations, big demonstrations for Gagners. I'll just tell one story. I mean, for pushing Gagners really to follow, I don't know if it was in the Constitution then, but it became the law later when the state of Ohio formed the Public Accommodations Commission, that it had to cut people's hair, everybody's. The National Association for the Advancement of White People got involved to support Gagner. And they came and they picketed for Gagner. Except that Judge, I forget his name now, from Greene County, had put a limit on the number of pickets that could picket Gagner. It was an injunction. I'm going to say no more than 4 people could picket Gagner. Well, the question was, who would grab that picket line first that day when the National Association for the Advancement of White People came to picket for Gagner? Turns out they did. They were willing to get up at 5 a.m. and they formed a picket line in front of Gagner. We marched down Xenia Avenue, and Arthur Morgan was with us in this big march. And we were across the street. The NAACP was in front of Gagner's picketing. We were across the street with several hundred people. And it occurred to me, wait a minute, there's an injunction. No more than 4 people can picket. So I asked somebody to cross the street, join the picket line. They did. The white people took 1 person off because they didn't want to get arrested. Hey, we got something going. So somebody else went. They took somebody off. Somebody else went. Now there was 3 of us and 1 of them. And then they realized that they were, being made fools of. So 1 of them got back on. So Sheriff Bradley came and read the injunction and arrested the whole group. White people and ACRE, Antioch Committee for Racial Equality. The headline said, pickets, picket, pickets. And the whole bunch was sent to Xenia County Jail. Later, Asher Bogan, maybe he was your attorney as well, Jeff, became the attorney for everybody, this whole group, in front of the judge. And it was weird because he was also representing the white person, the fascist. And I'll never forget this. He said, I forget his name. He said, "Are you white?" And Mr. Asher said, "Yes." And Asher said, "How do you know?" And that kind of confused him. Anyway, I think everybody was found guilty, but fined a minimal amount of money. This was right after I had come back from Southwest Georgia. I was organizing for SNCC, and my lung collapsed. And I came back to Antioch to recuperate, and became, in that period, chair of ACRE. And I also led the Antioch Dayton delegation to the March on Washington, because this was 1963. And this was the beginning of another theme to me of what Antioch meant. On the one hand, Antioch was kind of a bubble of protection. We were allowed to be ourselves when we knew that the rest of the world was against us. And I'm talking politically now. We were sons and daughters of Congress, red diaper babies. Can I get you to wrap up in about a minute? Sure. Can you do that? At the March on Washington, however, I saw a big slice of America. Antioch brought me into the world. It also brought me into the world in the sense of allowing me to have the, I was editor of the Record, allowing me to have the qualifications to work for the Dayton Daily News, to work for the National Student Association, which I ended up in Washington. It was part of the mainstream discussion. Antioch, in short, was an institution that both protected you from what otherwise would have been tremendous consequences for you being yourself, but also allowed you to become part of the world. And I think Antioch is continuing in that tradition today, and I applaud it.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit. When was it Caden or Cadden?
Cadden.
Wendy Cadden is a class of 68,
Oh,
is a well-recognized printmaker, painter, and activist who's dedicated her art to supporting progressive causes. These include the American Indian occupation of Alcatraz, the Black Power movement, and the Berkeley Free Speech movement. She's participated in the formation of the Gay Women's Liberation, the Lesbian and Family Movement in Northern California. And she is a founding member of the Women's Free Press and director of Diana Press, publishing the works of many lesbian and feminist poets and writers. So Wendy, your vote.
I get to be in person.
Yep, you get to be in person.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. All right. I'm so. Oh, goodness. Well, I did all that because of Antioch. I mean, this was a place that was obviously for all of us an inspirational place, or we wouldn't come back again. And David, thank you for organizing this panel, making it happen. And thanks to all the activists who have carried the torch for us for so many years. And I want to talk about media. I want to talk about unsocial media, what I learned at Antioch. I almost wanted to say antisocial, but I call it unsocial media, the ways that we collectively got so much done during the 50s and 60s and 70s, and why I believe we have such a backlash today. Yeah. I came to Antioch ready to learn, engaged with new ideas and new friends, ready to transform myself into a professional activist. I already had that notion of activism. I came from a family of journalists and political organizers who had been brought up before the House Un-American Activities Committee, but more importantly, had gotten a lot of work done during their lifetimes. So I had learned quite a lot about communication, the craft of communication, about the basics of printing and ways to get the word out. When I arrived at Antioch, Marshall McLuhan's ideas were in the fore. The medium, he said, is the message. The way we communicate is as important as the message itself. And he could envision technology allowing us to create a global village. He was way ahead of his time, right? But our culture had been shaped by type, by the written word, by the first books to be printed in multiples. The written word gave us a proliferation of broadsides, of newspapers, of posters, of publishing houses, and the mass distribution of books. Even as many people were excluded from literacy in libraries, print produced a more democratic society. Ideas could be shaped and shared by large groups of people. At Antioch, I was surrounded by brilliant thinkers, all in formative stages of their lives, ready to become activists, muralists, journalists, writers, disability activists, painters, budding filmmakers, all preparing to change the world. Our generation of activists began with very few sophisticated tools for film and video and marginal access to TV or even radio. When we wanted to get the message out, we used music, guerrilla theater, poster art, speeches, and the written word for mass organizing. Mostly our media was direct and distribution person to person. What I remember about Antioch was the proliferation of posters. Every room had psychedelic posters, movie posters of Casablanca and La Dolce Vita, not to mention posters that were political. Many people think that social media is a wonderful tool for this global village. And I keep reminding people of what we have always said. Freedom of the press belongs to those who own the presses. To get the word out, we needed to own the media. ACT UP owned the media when we created the AIDS quilt that rocked the nation with its powerful message of the scope of the AIDS epidemic, the human toll, and the beauty of each and every soul. The United Farm Workers' Great Boycott controlled the message when we picketed Safeway supermarkets across the country and shut many of them down. Artist Judy Baca took control of walls spanning a half-mile in Los Angeles to create murals depicting the people's history of California. They stand as a public record of community activism, interracial harmony, and the accomplishments of working people, working artists. The occupation of Alcatraz Island by the American Indian movement, these are all movements that I participated in or photographed. They headlined the message from Native voices protesting broken treaties and ongoing genocide. Now, social media allows us to be witnesses to the past, to information and opinions that we have not shared before. I love this, but I remind myself that if we do not control the media, we do not control the message. In the words of Audre Lorde, if you don't use your power, somebody else will. When I first came to Antioch, I was well aware of the harsh conditions of apartheid, Jim Crow in the American South, the legacy of slavery, of lynchings, and the realities of police brutality in our streets. When my co-op job took me to the American Southwest, however, I became aware of how ignorant I was about the Spanish and Mexican history of the Western territories and the systematic subjugation and genocide of Native people, the depth and breadth of Native culture and practices. When I returned to Antioch, I knew I wanted to continue my media study methods of communication. Antioch had a lithography press tucked away in the art department that had been handcrafted by a former art teacher, Robert Whitmore. I found it unused for many years and began to learn the trades. First from a man at the bookplate company who shared the basics of linotype and letterpress. And then on my own, I started printing on the abandoned press. Years later, out of a group we called Gay Women's Liberation, we formed the Women's Press Collective, and along with the Women's Place Bookstore, Diana Press, we transformed Oakland into a women's community, publishing and printing and distributing books, and with Olivia Records music. The first rape crisis center was open, an innovative women's health center. Hente was formed by activist women of color who sang and wrote and spoke out for social justice and founded the Lesbian Archives. We took back the streets in force and assisted women in combating domestic violence, changing locks on many doors. This I learned at Antioch. A lot of the technical skills, shared information about pregnancy and prevention and abortion, helped women detox while caring for their children, supported women in court who dared to confront their rapists. Antioch prepared me for all of this direct action. It was our boot camp. Our media was action. Our message was empowerment. We owned and controlled the presses, and we shared equipment with Inkworks, a print shop that produced brilliant political posters, and with the Black Panther Party, who produced newspapers for more than a decade with a circulation of 300,000 copies a week at its height. That's a lot of serious likes. My message, media control, is in peril. Imagine a week without connectivity, without the internet. Just imagine it was shut down. The media has become the message. And blessings on the muralists that blazoned the streets in bright yellow with Black Lives Matter.
Now, if somebody can just get to Rupert Murdoch, we could control the press.
All right.
All right. Last but not least, for sure, we have Jeff Jones. And this is an interesting bio. So Jeff attended Antioch for 2 years, it looks like here, leaving in April of '67, but Antioch definitely left his impression on him. So he joined both the anti-war movement, that's why he left Antioch, I think, and the Students for Democratic Society. He was part of the group of Antiochians who went to Cincinnati in 1965 to participate in the first International Day of Protest against the Vietnam War. He attended his first SDS convention in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, that December, and helped organize a national SDS conference here at Antioch. The next year, for his second co-op job, he worked with the Yellow Springs Dayton Area Coordinating Committee against the Vietnam War. He left Antioch in '67 to become the SDS Regional Coordinator for New York City. He was elected SDS Interorganizational Secretary in June of 1969, when I came to Antioch. And that winter, after the police killing of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton in Chicago, Jeff helped organize, along with a couple other Antiochians, the Weather Underground, and was a federal fugitive until his arrest in October 1981. He went on to become a journalist and is today active supporting the environmental and climate justice movement. He currently lives in New York's Capital Region, where he lobbies the state legislature on behalf of environmental and clean energy organizations. He's the chair of the board of the Harlem-based We Act for Environmental Justice and president of Adirondack-based John Brown Lives. Who knew? So Jeff, it's all yours.
David, thank you very much. Hi. Greetings, everybody. So sorry not to be there. Is it working?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I realize now when I wrote that for you that that's my entire prepared speech. So it's been great, everybody. I do want to say, out of respect, much respect for my elders who have spoken today and did all the great work over the years at Antioch, that I came to Antioch in the fall of 1965, having grown up in a Quaker community in Southern California, and with a father who had been a conscientious objector in the Second World War, a beautiful community of people. But I also was very active in the YMCA, and I remember as I was leaving to head east that someone that I had known in the YMCA said, "Whatever happens, don't let them change you when you get to Yellow Springs, when you get to Antioch." Well, that lasted for 6 weeks. Exactly 6 weeks, and that's when I went to Cincinnati for the first International Days of Protest against the Vietnam War. That day, I feel dramatically changed my life, and I always appreciate having been at Antioch for that to happen. We were out in front of the Federal Building. We were surrounded. We had to be escorted away to safety by the Ohio State Police. I don't know, or the Cincinnati Police. I don't know how often that happened. We went to have a gathering at a home that night in Cincinnati. I can't remember whose home it was, but they were people that some of you probably know who had ties to the trainings that went on for Freedom Summer the year before, and a brick came through the window and hit one of the people who was at this gathering with us. Fortunately, she was not injured, but we were all. It was what we called in the hippie days a reality sandwich, and it really that began a commitment on my part to be a part of the anti-war movement at a militant level, The other thing that I attribute to Antioch specifically is that I arrived at a time when they were launching the new, they called it, this is what they told us, new experimental first year program. I don't know how, I know there was a lot of controversy over time. We began to realize that some of the professors didn't like the idea that we were being told that we could direct our own education. And the other thing that was going on simultaneously, I believe, is that I believe it was the Rockefeller Foundation had put some serious money on the table to recruit some Black students to increase the Black population at Antioch, and that had a very profound effect on the Antioch community to a really important degree in 1965, 66 while I was there. I'll just say there was talk earlier about the importance of hitchhiking. So since I was responsible for my own education in the fall of 1965, got together with a couple of friends and I said, okay, let's hitchhike to Washington, D.C. and lobby against the war in Vietnam. And I'll never forget those nighttime rides in some big semi trucks over through West Virginia and into D.C. Then we went into the Capitol and we lobbied against the war and we hitchhiked back to Antioch. And that was my main project in the fall of 65. The next year, I did work with the Dayton area. It was a new organization. There was just two of us, the Dayton Area Coordinating Committee Against the War. And we did a lot of work around southwestern Ohio, and then went down into Kentucky and made it as far as Tennessee for a series of anti-war meetings. This was in 66. But the other thing that happened to me at that time was some of the people that I had become friends with, that I'd been drawn to just for their politics and their personality, said, hey, let's go to New York City for the weekend. And I said to myself, is that something we can do? So we piled into a VW bus. I remember, a Beetle. There was, I think, 5 of us. I remember it as the most uncomfortable 20 hours of my life. Came across the George Washington Bridge at about 6:30 in the morning. And I said, oh my, this is where I want to be. And so I changed all my plans and basically threw myself into New York City, where I did political work for the next, I'm still doing political work in New York City, but I lived there for the next 25 years until I kind of began to return to some of my Southern California roots, which included a lot of outdoors. My family camped every weekend that I can remember growing up, somewhere in the mountains of the Sierras or along the California coast, south of Santa Barbara. That was the outdoors was a very big part of my life, and it's a relief to me that I have been able to work all these years in the environmental movement. And I would like to just say a few more words about that. But finishing up with the experience that led me to the Weather Underground. Our headquarters were in Chicago. We've heard reference to working with the Panthers. We became very close with Fred Hampton, the Chicago Panther leader, who we didn't agree about everything. We had some very real and significant discussions over the year, not over the years, unfortunately, over the months. But in fact, I was on a radio program with him talking about the movement in late November of 1969, and he was gunned down by the Chicago police. Emotional moment about 6 days later, and so to be that close to someone who was assassinated by the police in a situation for which no one has ever been held accountable had a very profound impact on my life and the decisions that I made. And the group the militant wing of SDS that I was involved with, we can talk about that someday if anybody's interested, but we were wondering if and this is the biggest mistake we made, in my opinion. We were wondering if mass protests were effective anymore. Look, this was 1969. Little did we know the war would go on for another 5 years. Another 1.5 million people would be killed in Vietnam. Another 25,000 American soldiers would be killed. But we felt like we needed to take our resistance to the Vietnam War to a higher level. And at the same time, the civil rights movement, I think, as this audience is probably quite aware, was transitioning to the Black liberation struggle. And so at the same time as wanting to become more militant in relation to the war in Vietnam, we also felt an obligation to actually open another front and become a problem for the government so that they couldn't direct all their attention at repressing the Panthers. Okay, that's what we thought we were doing. It can be evaluated whether we were right or whether we were successful. But not only did we set out to do that, but we did it for 5 years, and some people did it for longer. There was Larry, you were talking about knowing, I think Joni, or maybe Jeff, you were talking about knowing Joni Rabinowitz. Kathy Boudin, one of my best friends who just died earlier. She died last year. So she's been gone for a little over a year now. We were together in the underground years. We supported her for the 22 years that she was in prison. And then we were best friends in the years after she got out of prison, and her loss is a tremendous loss. I feel that every day. So, and that's just one example of people in that category. It's a very broad, quick passage through my history, but after dealing with my legal problems, after being arrested and ending the fugitive years, I did actually become a reporter at the Guardian newspaper in New York City, left-wing publication. And then that led to another deepening of the journalism career when we moved upstate. And moving upstate kind of brought me back closer in touch with my sort of outdoor DNA. And so I became the communications director of a statewide environmental organization. But at the same time, throughout all of this, I've always focused on things from the point of view of fighting white supremacy and supporting the Black liberation struggle. And so today I'm active in the climate movement. I'm very proud to be a part of this organization based in Harlem called We Act for Environmental Justice. We Act has an office in Washington, D.C. now, federal policy office. We're very active in New York City, in New York State, and this year will be the third year that we've actually had a presence at the COP, the global climate movement. And last year I wasn't there. I haven't taken these trips. This year we'll be in Dubai. God help us. Another fossil fuel controlled state. The fossil fuel interests have taken over the COP process, but there is resistance, and we are a part of that resistance. So that the focus at this year's COP will be doing everything we can to get the developed first world nations, the global north, however you want to describe it, to live up to their commitments to put billions and billions of dollars on the table to help address the climate crisis in the developing world, the global south. And that these are promises that have been made and that have not been kept. And the bottom line, which defines everything that I have experienced in all of my 50 some odd years since leaving Antioch, is the people least responsible for this particular crisis are the ones who are suffering the most. And the people who are most responsible for it are still profiting off of it. And I find that, I think I'll just fight about that every day. I have a philosophy: do something to fight the bastards every day. And I define my politics as from weather to climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. All right, panelists, thank you very much. I know everybody here appreciates your stories as much as I do. And you're doing good work, and you definitely have an Antioch heritage that we're hoping will pass on to this next generation, and hopefully the generation after that. So Thank you again for your time and your participation and all your life work for that matter. Well, maybe we could take a question or two. I don't want to push people for the next event or no.
What's the future look like for you all?
So we have a question.
Can you hear me? I'm just, hi Larry, it's lovely, it's Catherine Jordan, nice to see you.
Hi.
Can you talk about your view of the future? I mean, we're up against some very serious pushback and problems in the world. I think the rise in authoritarianism, and I can use the F word. So what are you thinking? What would you advise?
That's why I'm in Mississippi. What happens in Mississippi never stays here. If groups in Mississippi organize against really the most repressive system in the country, which they are, and succeed, which they're coming close to, they're making progress, we can defeat Trumpism. And that's not true just in Mississippi, it's true around the country. The simple and very difficult and very complicated answer is people need to organize, and they are organizing. The labor movement is changing, it's understanding how to reach people better. Big elements within the Democratic Party are. I think DSA and the entire socialist movement is understanding more about reaching people. The simple and complicated answer is people need to organize and are organizing. I always say, if people get together and stay together, mostly they lose until they win.
Have another question? No? Can you wait for a mic?
Oh,
Hang on, he's coming. They're coming. One moment, please.
I wonder what Stephen Gould answered you when you asked him why.
no.
Do you remember?
Yes, actually. He said, you know, this has to do, well, let me take a step back. We haven't said this, but in Steve's case, in my case, I suspect in Jeff's case too, but I don't know. A lot of this had to do with us coming from the secular Jewish tradition. In my mind, it was all mixed up. Being Jewish, being left wing, it was hard for me to make that distinction because of my background. Steve's answer was in that context. He said, you know, if you study natural history, you learn the material basis for the world. And you learn that the material world is what affects us. And that's going to be his contribution to the progressive movement. And actually it was in the end. I don't think he even knew at that time the tremendous impact he would have. But that was his answer.
Any others? All right. Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you. I might add one thing. If you're interested in about Antioch's connection to the Weathermen, there's a book by Jonathan Lerner who was in Antioch, dropout also, who worked with Jeff. In fact, that's where I got Jeff's name, who wrote a book on that whole process and that time. And I can't remember the title at the moment, but it's a really interesting read. Is that going to hear? Here. All right. 3 o'clock. All right. So the next session is the award plenary at 3 o'clock.
David, I have a question.
Goodbye, guys.
I have a
Thank
question.
you.
A lot of hands that cross.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, I know. It's amazing, isn't it? All those cross currents.
Check one.
We were all cross. Can I close this or?
We were staying in the same Zoom.
Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't want to shut them off. I thought,
Yeah.
well, maybe they'll just.
Yeah. It would have been interesting. Yeah.
This actually worked out okay. We got the things.
Well done.
I'm really excited about next tomorrow's panels too. So tomorrow we're doing one on the strike in the morning. And for the afternoon, we're gonna do our 50 years. Well, it'll get we're good. Yeah. I just it's been really tough. Yeah, I mean, even that was like, what?
And all that. I'm one of those red dog babies. The generation that comes with that, all those neighbors who grew out of, they were they grade. For last thing, like, yeah, playwright, my mom wanted to federal theater. I told half of it. Minor later on, Dr. But yeah, I mean, I kind of grow up in Mother Smith. Well, we started from nothing. We had that. At the moment, but you know, I feel, you know, but very join
yeah, maybe just I'm getting all down the last time. I really see a lot of those nice.
I think on all fronts, and it's all good if you're gonna have to put it on all fronts all the time. So Jeff Jones and I, when I was my last meeting, he was 65. You know, so we sort of and we had a class together that we had to call me New York a couple of times.
Well, I wasn't sure I could. I read Jonathan Lerner's book, and I got in touch with Jonathan. He talks a lot about
Jeff, because he had a crush on Jeff. And he kept wanting to run into him when he was organizing stuff, so it's a great, yeah, it's really. You work it, yeah.
All right, so I have a mic for you.
Right.
Right now, it's all turned down, so you won't hear anything right now, so you don't have to worry about talking.
Right. Now we're right forever.
And once we start, we're gonna start.
Anyway,
so we can kind of air out the room. You want me to prop that open? I will do that. And with the camera, we have a fixed camera up there, and we're gonna train it on you. Where do you want to stand? You're gonna stand here? Then you can stand where you want to sit on one of the chairs. Okay.
I just.
And if we can have you try to stand pretty still in the camera, so we don't have anyone up there. Talking with your hands is okay. Yeah, try not to move too much. And yep, I'm gonna come up and get the video playing from here. So I'll listen to you, or and then I'll hit play. Yeah. So you do one hold, and then I'll listen for the introduction. Once I hear the introduction, I'll go on. That's on. I'll just, once we start the session, I'll bring the volume up. And
They were gonna abandon them. Hold up. And every one of those cars got stopped before they got to where they were going. So we got, they're here. You in God's presentation. I'm sorry. I'm gonna give it. Yes, I was. I was standing on the stairs. Make sure. It was very dramatic. Yeah, we'll tell you when we're starting to take a few more minutes. No. Oh, yeah. No, and it was very shocking. I was watching that mine police cars come up and drive right around the triangle and stop. There were a lot of police here, like, okay, show reverse. We'll talk about that tomorrow. I think there was some conversation between the strike party and
be on here now.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm Oh, that's good. That's. And I hope, well, it's not something I work on your website. Yeah, I've gotten that much. But a few of them, I think, what emphasis black guys have done to a whole lot of community. Yeah, yeah. You know, I know it's like. good, but. All right. Music. Passive and zip. Just need to provide a media, so control it. Oh, you're totally right. People are so channel one, like Fox News, for example, that we lose the possibility of. I got my subscription to that. Oh, no. Yes. That's true. You know, they could be the future. Yeah, you know, I think of the person before, but I think of this one, because I one of my classes was multimedia kind of thing. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Talk later.
Right. Hey, can you give me some check 1-2s on the light?
Check. Yes. Doing this. Yeah, sounds good. Does it, can you hear me in the back? Cannot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even need a mic.
You can hear me?
I do, I know.
But when the room is quiet, we're gonna start in about a minute.
Conrad, I can't see my.
Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tony Dosick, class of 1967. I'm a member of the Alumni Board, and I am incoming chair of the Governance Committee. And it's our responsibility to choose the nominations for the annual Antioch College Alumni Awards. It is a tremendous challenge to choose the nominees for these awards. It's the responsibility of the Governance Committee to sift through more than 150 names of alumni who have been put forward as possible recipients. All are qualified. We could actually give out an award every week, and we would not honor all of the people who graduated from this college, who have won victories for humanity, exemplified community, made significant contributions to the college, advanced Antioch's ideals, and in the case that I'm going to describe now, distinguished themselves in their field. The Rebecca Rice Award is named for one of the first women graduates of Antioch, class of 1860, and the first female member of the faculty of Antioch College, who taught an amazing combination of French, mathematics, and astronomy in the 1870s. And this award recognizes alumni of the college who, by their actions, achievements, and leadership, have distinguished themselves and their alma mater. The recipient of this award this year is Catherine Brown, class of 1958. She is unable to be here. She lives on the West Coast, and we have 3 Zoom presentations from the other award winners. We do not have it from Capan for all kinds of crazy logistical reasons, but I will introduce her to you, and we will be mailing her her award. She has worked as a printmaker, an entrepreneur, a writer, and she is the founder of Crown Point Press. And as an etching workshop in 1962, 4 years after graduating from Antioch College. It's located in San Francisco, and it is an influential fine art publisher and is credited with reviving etching as a viable art medium. In 1997, it received an award from the city of San Francisco for business excellence, and its work has been in exhibits at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., the Fine Arts Museum of San Francisco, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Catherine is the author of 8 books and has lectured widely. Beside her BA from Antioch, she has an MFA from California College of Arts and Crafts, and she holds honorary degree doctorates from the San Francisco Art Institute and the California College of the Arts. As she cannot be here today and was unable to make the recording, I took the liberty of learning more about her, which I will briefly share with you. Like so many of us Antiochians, she was and is an adventurer and someone who can seize an opportunity. For instance, in 1959, just having graduated from Antioch, while on a trip to Edinburgh, Scotland, she noticed an old etching press in the backyard of her digs, which is British for rooming house. Her landlady offered the press to Brown, and with a heavy press in tow, Brown booked passage on a freighter going to San Francisco from Glasgow via the Panama Canal. I imagine that with a press in your hands. From that beginning, Brown Point now publishes work by over 100 artists, including Richard Heathcorn, Wayne Thiebaud, Ed Ruscha, Chuck Close, and others. In an interview she gave to the Smithsonian Museum in 2017, she talks about what drew her to Antioch. It was the spirit of openness and curiosity and the diverse programs. She also mentions that the Glen attracted her, and she actually had a job at the Glen and later at the Fine Arts Museum in Worcester, Mass. She also spent a year through Antioch Education Abroad at the Central School of Arts and Crafts in London. Another very worthy recipient of the Rebecca Rice Award. We have some videos of our other award winners, and I'm just going to do a very brief introduction. I am pleased and very honored to present the Horace Mann Award to Stephen Sadie, class of 1973. This award recognizes a contribution by an alumna of Antioch College who has won a victory for humanity following Horace Mann's directive to the graduating class of 1858, 145 years ago. Stephen is a federal public defender, a position, frankly, that I did not know exists. The Sixth Amendment of the Constitution guarantees an accused the right to representation by counsel in serious criminal prosecutions. In 1964, the Criminal Justice Act established a comprehensive process for appointing and compensating lawyers to represent defendants who would otherwise go without representation. In 1970, that law was amended to also authorize districts to establish federal defender organizations as counterparts to federal prosecutors. Today, there are more than 3,700 lawyers, investigators, paralegals, and support personnel doing this work. Stephen Sadie is the federal defender for the United States District Court in Oregon. He holds a JD degree from Lewis and Clark University College of Law. Among his victories for humanity is his work on fair and more balanced federal sentencing guidelines and the landmark case where he successfully defended the Somali American accused of trying to ignite a weapon of mass destruction at the City of Portland's 2010 holiday tree lighting ceremony. He also helped to free a Syrian college student detained at Guantanamo. I could go on. He's been doing this work for 20 years. I don't know Steve personally, but we have a friend in common, a fellow professor at the College of Law at Lewis and Clark University. This is what my friend Steve Cantor had to say about Steve Sadie. Steve is a great guy who has devoted his life to making the criminal justice system live up to its constitutional ideals and help countless people who had no other friend. A very worthy recipient of the Horace Mann Award for winning victories for humanity.
Thank you for the opportunity to reflect on Antioch College and how it's affected my life. I've been a federal public defender for 42 years, representing folks charged with federal crimes who can't afford a private lawyer. My office handles a wide array of federal trial cases and appeals involving drug trafficking, bank robbery, fraud, immigration, firearms, major crimes under Indian reservations, and national security cases. We also represent incarcerated people in heat and corporate cases, challenging state convictions obtained in violation of federal constitutional rights, the execution of federal sentences by the Bureau of Prisons, the legality of detention by immigration authorities, and for 6 Guantanamo Bay detainees, the designation as an enemy combatant. When I entered Antioch College in 1969, I did not have a thought of being a lawyer. It was the work study program that called me, sending me to co-op jobs in psychiatric hospitals and operating rooms, and later with the United Farm Workers Union. And I could make some pretty direct connections to Antioch years in my work. Editing for the Record sharpened my writing skills. My first Spanish class with Patricia from Chile helped me for communicating with my clients. And the psychology work was so important in a system where mental illness pervades the prison system. But the sharpest effect of Antioch on my future was kind of accidental. In my third year, I decided to choose my own adventure for co-op, having heard I could make some money for tuition in the shipyards of Pascagoula, Mississippi. I was sort of following Kurt Vonnegut's idea of strange travel suggesting for dancing lessons from God. After hitchhiking into town, I was invited by a welder from Mena, Arkansas, to take a spare bed in a room with about 20 other shipyard workers. The next morning, after needing to return to the room, it was locked. The landlord called the sheriff, and everyone else ran, but the welder and I were arrested. They found a matchbox with a green substance in the springs of someone else's bed. In the local press, the judge said any drug defendant, because they thought that green substance was marijuana, would end up with 5 years in the notorious Parkman Farm. After a few days, I bailed out and started working as a laborer in the shipyard to pay for counsel, Ransom Howell Jones III. And a couple of months later, with the jury and panel, the court holds a motion to suppress evidence. The landlord testified falsely about how long I'd been there, but he also said that he called the sheriff, Ben Navarrete, who entered the room, searches the springs of the bed, pulled out the matchbox, then went to get a warrant. And I heard that something in the back of the courtroom was kind of laughing a little bit. And the prosecutor called Ben Navarrete, who then testified he never crossed the threshold of that room until he had a warrant. With the conflicting testimony, the judge granted the motion, dismissed the case. Now, the welder from Mena, Arkansas, he was represented by court-appointed counsel, and he cut a deal just before the trial to testify against me in exchange for conditional release. And rather than lie on the stand, he fled.
Wow.
So I learned some significant things in Pasadena that have informed my life and practice. You're a lawyer, you've got to understand it. Witnesses lie through ignorance and self-interest. Defendants with retained counsel should not have better representation than those with appointed counsel. And if you do not assert your constitutional rights, those rights mean little in the real world. The grant of the motion to suppress and certify lifelong interest in litigating and writing about fulfilling the Fourth Amendment promise of protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. So I can say that my Antioch experience informed three basic mantras that have guided my practice. In a system of mass incarceration, I teach everyone who listens and does practice in the federal court, every day of lost freedom counts. Also, in a system of overwhelming executive power, appointed counsel has to be unafraid in dealing with the massive power of the state and challenge basic assumptions and develop individual facts in fighting for our clients. And in a system that often disregards the humanity of the indigent accused, appointed counsel needs to listen to and respect the person who's being represented in establishing and achieving the goals of representation. Aside from Antioch's effect on my professional life, Antioch played an outside role in my personal life. As an Antioch student, living through frequent moves and intense times of years up to graduation, I'm sure I share with most Antiochans the value of friendships deepened by our experiences together, some of which are still together today. Best for me, the person I kissed in an alley off of Dean Avenue in May of 1972 is still my wife and mother of 3 children. I hope to see some of you next year in Yellow Springs celebrating the 50th anniversary of Gabriel's graduation. Thank you.
You're going to hear this phrase a lot from me today, but it is truly a pleasure and an honor to introduce Mariela Arredondo, class of 1998, the recipient of this year's Walter F. Anderson Award. This award recognizes contributions by alumni and friends of Antioch College who have advanced the college's ideals by breaking down racial and ethnic barriers. Mariela is Associate Research Scientist with the Center on Education and Lifelong Learning at the Indiana Institute on Disability and Community at Indiana University. She works with school districts in the state to systematically target issues of racial, ethnic disparities in school exclusion, identification, and placement in special education. Her research focuses on the intersectionality of race, ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation in disparities in school discipline and academic outcomes. Beside her degree from Antioch in Global and Social Studies, she has a master's in Applied Linguistics from Ohio University, a master's in Latin American and Caribbean Studies, and a doctorate in Education Policy with a focus on comparative international education from Indiana University, Bloomington. Mariela Arredondo.
Good evening, distinguished members of the Antioch community, dear friends and fellow members of the class of 1998. I extend my warmest greetings to all the esteemed guests gathered here tonight. My name is Mariela Arredondo, and although I cannot be physically present in Yellow Springs, I am there with you in spirit. Yellow Springs holds a special significance for me as it is intertwined with countless cherished memories and meaningful connections. As we're gathered in Yellow Springs together, I am in Seattle, Washington with 5 of my dearest and closest friends whom I met at Antioch: Rada, Creek, Clover, Clarissa, and Shirani. Even though the 6 of us live spread out across the USA, we have managed to get together at least once a year, every year since we graduated from Antioch 25 years ago. When I arrived in Yellow Springs, Ohio for my first day at Antioch, I was a 17-year-old, brave yet timid, Peruvian-born, New Jersey raised, bilingual, bicultural, child immigrant, new student. I had an insatiable curiosity for languages, cultures, history, philosophy, exploration, a commitment to social justice, and admiration for everything John Lennon. It was also at Antioch that I found my love for the woods as I made the Glen my home away from home. During my time at Antioch, I embarked on a profound journey of self-discovery amidst a tapestry of diverse perspectives and experiences. The concept of remaining true to oneself while navigating this rich tapestry became a constant process of negotiation, an ongoing odyssey that extends to the present day. Within the unique context of Antioch, I found a sanctuary of freedom and support that allowed me to explore and redefine my own version of normalcy. This new normal I embraced involved venturing beyond the confines of the classroom, putting into practice the ideas and discussions that shaped our academic pursuits. I dared to question established norms, engage in critical dialogue often overlooked, and fervently sought to comprehend the true essence of Horace Mann's call to achieve victories for humanity, even if it meant accomplishing just one before our inevitable demise. A pivotal moment during my first quarter at Antioch involved an influential professor named Ivan Mihal. He encouraged me to pursue a PhD after graduation, recognizing perhaps my potential and the impact that I could make. Inspired by his belief in me, I wholeheartedly embraced the idea and embarked on the journey towards earning my doctorate, making Ivan proud of my decisions and my accomplishments. After graduating from Antioch, my focus shifted towards understanding and dismantling the barriers that hinder educational equity for historical underserved students. Exploring the realms of Amerindian Quechua language and culture during my early graduate work, I discovered the transformative power of education and reshaping unequal relationships. Approaching bilingual education from the lens of linguistic human rights serves as my entry point into broader issues of educational equity and social justice. As a faculty researcher at Indiana University, my dedicated efforts over the past decade have revolved around an in-depth exploration of the profound repercussions of exclusionary discipline, namely suspensions and expulsions at school, on students of color within the United States. To address these pressing concerns, I dedicated 5 years to a high-profile project known as the Race and Gender Disparity Research and Practice Collaborative. This collaborative initiative aims to bring together researchers, advocates, educators, parents, students, and policymakers on a quarterly basis for 2 years. The purpose was to develop and promote a policy agenda that would drive meaningful change in both practice and policy regarding equity in school discipline. By leveraging insights from these diverse stakeholder groups and incorporating the latest research findings, that collaborative identified gaps in knowledge and practices that needed urgent attention. In conclusion, Antioch College has been an invaluable part of my journey, shaping my perspective and equipping me with the tools necessary to navigate an ever-evolving world. It has taught me that true growth lies in challenging the status quo, embracing diversity, and fostering connections through empathy and understanding. One last yet profoundly important aspect I would like to address is the humbling significance of being chosen As a recipient of this STEAM award, particularly following in the footsteps of an extraordinary individual like the late John Sims, a remarkable member of the class of 1980. John's unwavering commitment to achieving victories for humanity is awe-inspiring, and his impact on the world cannot be overstated. As I stand here today, I am reminded of his legacy and the lasting mark he left on our collective journey. John, may you rest in power, dear friend. Your contributions will be forever treasured. I would also like to take this moment to express my sincere gratitude to each and every one of you for your remarkable gifts. Together we form a community that fosters growth, compassion, and the pursuit of social justice. It is through our collective efforts and the sharing of our unique gifts that we can contribute to create a more equitable and harmonious world. Thank you for your kind attention. Now go forth and have a remarkable evening filled with inspiration and empowerment. Thank you.
See what I mean? Last but not least for this afternoon, and I wanted to remind people that this evening we have the winner of the Arthur Morgan Award, who will be who's here live and in color, and will be presenting. We'll present that award to her tonight. But the last one here on video is Ellen Borgerson, class of 1972. She's the recipient of the J.D. Dawson Award. This award recognizes significant contributions to Antioch College by alumni or friends of the college who have contributed a significant way to Antioch. She received her J.D. degree from the University of Michigan Law School in 1976, magna cum laude, and clerked for Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart from 1977 to 1978. She practiced law at a large international law firm in San Francisco and was a senior lecturer and associate dean at Stanford Law School. In the early 2000s, she joined the alumni board of Antioch College. And at the urging of Catherine Jordan, who's sitting here today, when the University of joined the current, who's on the current, and Catherine is on the current alumni board. In 2007, when the university trustees announced the closure of the college, a group of alumni board members, including Ellen, formed the Antioch College Continuation Fund. Ellen actually moved to Yellow Springs from her home in the Bay Area and worked pro bono to support the effort to reopen Antioch College. A rocky road to get there for sure, but her tireless work on behalf of the college at that critical time helped bring Antioch College back to life. Ellen Borgerson. First, of course, thank you so much for this award, the J.D. Dawson Award. I am extremely honored and grateful. There are a few things in life that I've been more certain of than Antioch College from the first time I heard about it, which was probably when I was a high school sophomore. For some reason, I have memories of having been up in a tree at the time when a colleague of my mom's, who was a New York City public school teacher, junior high, her colleague said, "Eleanor, look at Antioch College." And I did. And from that moment, I was certain that this was where I wanted to go. As I told my parents, it was the only place that I would ask them to pay real money for. We lived in New York City, and so otherwise I would have gone to one of the city colleges. when the university announced during in 2007, they were going to close the college. And that was, of course, a great strategic and tactical error because we lost similar as we probably are now. And we looked at each other and said, "We're going to do what? We're going to close the college. Don't they know who they're dealing with?" I became convinced, I was certain, as I say, that I had to do my part to save the college. And I became equally certain that that required me to be physically present in Yellow Springs as much as I could. I'm not quite sure why I knew that, but I did. The reason for my being in Yellow Springs really was to support the development office, the Office of Institutional Advancement, which was under the incredible leadership of Lisa Grimes. And oh gosh, I didn't expect to get emotional there. But if you didn't know Lisa, you missed a gem, a star. She came to us at Clemson. And if you don't know the development officers, college development officers, as talented as Lisa, can literally write down and take that. She couldn't go anywhere, but she stayed with us. And we did an amazing job. This fight was about money. When Connie Murdoch was talking to her board, he said, "Oh, the alums will get tired. We just have to wait them out." And my reason for being in Yellow Springs as much as I could was to show them that wasn't true. And we could stick it out. But that wasn't going to amount to the whole piece, of course, if you couldn't raise money. And Lisa held together her staff, also very talented people, and she seduced Eric Miller away from the co-op faculty at that time, I think. Apologies, Eric, if I'm not remembering right. But she got him on board, and the whole staff did an amazing job. And Lisa and me Morgan traveled around the country and raised more money than the university ever thought we could. There were amazing moments of joy. For example, when I forget what the exact moment was. It wasn't when we got the keys back, it was before that, but Matthew Durr came back from some moment that gave us real hope that we were going to get the win, and he held a bidding war. It was in the Horseshoe, it was at night, and he got me and Vicki Morgan in the bidding war for to ring the bells and the whole thing. And it was a very anti-climax. Turns out that all you push back. Why over all of these many years have I been so certain that I wanted to go to Antioch, and that when its existence was threatened, I needed to do what I could to save it. And I can only speak from my experience. Obviously, the biggest part of it, in some sense, is co-op. That's why the alums always fight so hard to co-op whenever it's questioned, as it has been periodically over the years. It's very, very hard to maintain. My first co-op job was at the Chicago Historical Society. And as always, as we all do, we had to go and set up shop in a strange city, and there's something just magical and powerful about being thrown into a strange city when you're still young and stupid. And I mean, speaking in that sense of that world, it's, something so plastic and malleable about your brain, and you can be a little bit lonely and depressed, and no cell phones back then. I had to physically go down to the south side of Chicago in search of some Antiochian companionship, and didn't find the person I was looking for at home. I was standing on the street corner, and a dog came up and chewed on my leg. It's one of my fondest memories. I was 17 years old at the time. Antioch was amazing, but it was hard. It was really hard because it was a total experience. You lived it and you worked it and you participated in the community. And when I got to law school, it was so easy. It's like amazing. I thank the alumni board. I thank Antioch College. I will take this as discharging my debt to Horace Mann's curse. I can take this as my victory for humanity. I said when I ran for the alumni board way back when, whenever that was, the world needs Antioch College now more than ever, and it still does, and it always will, because it finds and it nurtures and it educates people who do legal truths for humanity and victories in their community and victories by breaking down barriers of race and ethnicity, and victories in their professions. And so, with honor to my fellow awardees and with gratitude to Antioch College, I thank you again for this award, and please, all of you out there, do what you can to keep our college alive.
Whoa, I hadn't seen that video all the way through, but I knew it was pretty impressive. I want to thank Michael. I want to thank Rose. I want to particularly thank Jesse Herr for doing the video. And I want to thank Michael Tibbin, class of 65, I think it's 65, for doing the editing, which he did literally for no money in the shortest period of time that anybody's ever edited video. And I want to thank all of you. I look forward to seeing you this evening for the presentation of the award to Ellen Roman.
Where will that be?
It will be in the, it'll be during dinner at the South Gym. As part of the dinner presentation. Elise Roman. Rennick. I'll get it right tonight, I promise you.
It's okay. It's never happened before, so.
I will get it right. I will get it right. Thank you all. And as I say, it's one of the most challenging things to choose out of so many outstanding alumni. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Good, more opening help. At least I felt.
Yeah, these are great. I remember correctly that Risa has got. But I don't went to Florida, I know. But I am.
But name on the board. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to introduce I think the team when you but I'll introduce everyone and then I'll tell you what's fine. I have no idea. I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna do about it. As you know. I figured what happened. Projected, but no one comes in early. Oh, good. And then I was like, how do I get to and before Kevin spoke, they don't remember, and now I have that. And I called anyway, yeah, and I said, well, there's a And then. Always a good idea.
Pretty sure. So how much protection? Does he have blood?
That's it. There might be one more. Nobody's been there, so I just want to let you know that we've got a couple guys there with lots of things there all day long. People thought it was the music, the first thing was no, because it was two different vendors.
Oh, no, I don't have to.
Or, you know, something.
Now, and will you be speaking up at the podium? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So you have the mic there. We have the mic sound. And do you want the whole table the whole time of the Zoom, or do you want? Perfect. Well, you know, also,
But the one that's been out there, for the, which is right?
Well, I can tell you, when I started out, I could fix him. And I rapidly discovered that every year there's a whole new generation of big people. It never did.
Better
Oh,
One solution, absolutely. They're all there. So they're all on some link. God only knows. And, but they're now on the right. And, it's just about.
We're here.
We're here. Hello.
And God knows we don't want to be early. So what I'm gonna do
We're-
is I'm gonna do Mary Ann.
Hello, we're here. We're here. We're here. You guys.
McGregor 113 is
They're all there now. They were all-
apparently joining us.
I don't know where.
So nobody knows we're here.
You're right.
I have no idea what that said. It's fine now.
Oh, look at that. Look at all the people.
Yeah, hi.
There's Emily.
Yeah, good. And there's who's the empty chair? Oh, that's Guy.
That's Guy Schumann.
Okay, good, good.
And there we're just missing Solar Joe.
Joe and
Oh, yeah, well, I hope he is ready. Well, he's in Australia, so it takes longer. Oh, okay. Okay, so we're gonna, the camera's gonna be on the pier. So, actually, I'll just stay up here with you. Oh, so when you're talking, you'll be here. So I'm just gonna.
Are you ready for me to bring the volume up?
1 more minute.
1 more minute.
Yeah, we just got a couple of people and we got to get people to settle in here. Let me give Lincoln a call and see.
So Susan, are there a lot of people in the audience?
Don't ask me. I can't see the audience.
Okay. I just thought maybe you would know if you've been a part of the discussions earlier.
Yeah, but I have no idea.
Because
Hi,
Marianne is pretty far away.
Well, Mary Ann's in the room.
Right, I see her, but she's so far away, it makes me think there's an audience in front of her.
There is. There's an audience. Yeah.
The perspective you have is from the audience. So.
We're speakers, is that right? Is that why we're here? Okay.
Okay, I just. I guess you're not going, so maybe, we'll proceed.
And I presume they have us muted in the room.
Wonderful, and otherwise, then if we come in afterwards, you where we thought you'd be, and we'll.
I'm still going to take my 7 minutes.
You got 7, I got 5.
Well, that's because I'm going first.
But mine goes over 5 too.
Well, I'll be uncharacteristically brief.
Okay, good. Give us
Yes.
some minutes.
Can we have an announcement that we have phones that we can talk to people and make sure that they're asking the questions?
And do you guys know about hide self-view so you don't have to be looking at yourself?
All right, Jess.
All right, you ready? Up in the upper right-hand corner, there's an option of hide self-view.
Yeah, well, you can do all kinds of things there. Yeah,
Right.
I like to look at myself if I'm talking,
Okay.
so I know how awful I look.
Oh, I don't, I find it
I want to make sure you're
distracting.
not drooling
Okay.
visually.
Right,
visibly.
right, yeah.
So maybe if the Zoom people could mute themselves till and then we'll call on you. And you could unmute yourself. And, we're Antiochians, we'll just go with the flow. And thank you for being so understanding. Okay, I'm going to start things off. I'm Jessie Herr. I'm a member of the Alumni Board, and I am on the reunion committee. And one of the people on the reunion committee is Mary Ann C., who is class of 1973, and is an environmental field program participant. So I'm going to and leader, and so I'm going to turn it over to her to run the program.
And Jessie got us all organized, so she deserves a lot of credit for that. So today, welcome. We're glad to see a good turnout here because the environmental field program was a hugely important part of Antioch for a long time and may have a future, we hope, in some form or other. I'm going to just introduce quickly Tom Herman to tell us a little bit more about how we envision this session to go. Can you cue Tom Herman?
He's all good.
If you unmute, I think that.
I hope I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, good.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks very much, Marianne. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Herman, class of 72. I was a biology BA and environmental studies joint major. and I led the second EFP in fall '71 along the Atlantic coastal plain from Chesapeake Bay to the Florida Keys. My apologies for being remote, but circumstances, would you believe a turtle conservation conference prevented me from attending in person, as much as I'd like to be there. This next hour is our opportunity to share with you a chapter in Antioch's history. It's a story about an idea that has touched and indeed changed many lives, including those from whom you're going to hear from over the next hour. You're going to learn about its birth, its maturation, and its evolution. And you'll hear about its myriad impacts. The Environmental Field Program, also known in the early days as Mobile Field Centers, has a rich and storied history. For 32 years, it was a dominant player on the environmental academic landscape at Antioch, and it offered far more than academic content. So, at the risk of being logical, I'm going to begin at the beginning, and appropriately, Sue Conard, who was integral in the origin of the program and who led the very first Mobile Field Center, EFP, will talk about the origins and emergence of the idea, the excitement and the challenges and the satisfactions. We'll then take a drone's eye view, aerial, that is, not boring, as Peter Townsend, a fixture in environmental science at Acadia for decades, provides an overview of EFP for its entire tenure, from its birth in 1971 to its demise in 2003. We'll then come back to Earth as Marianne shares her involvement with EFP and her experience as she transitioned from participant to leader. And after Marianne has bared her soul, we'll hear testimonials from participants through time, including Emily Ecker, Lincoln Kern, Guy Schumann, and Joe Yarkin. Following those testimonials, I'll rejoin the conversation with a perspective approach to take us into a Q&A and open discussion, which will draw the session to a close. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Sue Conard, an old friend and fellow EFPer, to tell us where it all started.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to try to share my screen. I hope I can do that. I might need permission. Can anyone give me permission to share my screen? Okay, can't do it, huh? All right, I will go ahead without sharing my screen. How's that? Too bad I had some really nice pictures of the Sierra Nevada in there.
Susan, I have the option to share screen.
Well, can you give it to me, please?
No, I mean, I'm seeing it. So are you looking down at the bottom of your?
Yes, but it's not. Oh, there, now it's sharing. It wasn't sharing before.
Okay.
Yay, okay.
Oh, good.
All right, can you all see my shared screen? Great.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk about the beginning and a little bit about the program that I was involved in running. I arrived in Antioch in 1968 as a transfer from Wellesley College, and what a relief that was to get out of white gloves and into the environment of Antioch. Antioch was just a much better fit. I made a lot of good friends, and it was also easy to get to know faculty members. So starting in about 1969, a small group of students and faculty began to talk about developing a quarter-long program that would involve intensive off-campus field study with small groups of students for full college credit. The first program we discussed was one in which the students would study the ecology and geology of the Sierra Nevada mountains while backpacking through California's fantastic forests and glaciated alpine environments. At the time, Antioch had a substantial grant from the Alfred Sloan Foundation for developing experimental education programs. And thanks to Bob Beery, who was one of the faculty members, we received funding to do a pilot of the Sierra Nevada trek with 4 people in the summer of 1970. Purpose of this pilot was both to get a better understanding of the logistics that would be involved in carrying out such a program, and for the potential leaders, Bob Holland and myself, to study the ecology, vegetation, and geomorphology of the Sierra Nevada so that we could lead a group the following year and act as kind of mentors and teachers. This was a new experience for me. I had hiked and camped for my whole life, but never done any backpacking. And here I was, headed off with 3 guys for a 6-week backpacking trip. Luckily, I managed to keep up with them. I loved it, and I learned a lot about living in the backcountry and about the Sierra Nevada. Bob Beery led the charge to persuade Antioch to carry out the initial program the following summer, the summer of 1971. As I recall, he was supported by a number of other science faculty, including Martin Murray, Walt Telecki, Claude Epstein, and John White, and the program was approved. The program was funded initially, I don't know what happened later, through student tuition and worth full academic credit. So we signed up 10 students, we started stocking up supplies, and we headed for California. After a lot of organizing and preparation of the group, many of whom were novice backpackers, as I had been the year before, we packed up all our gear and took off. We started in Yosemite National Park and hiked the high country for 6 weeks, ending up in Sequoia Kings Canyon National Park, with, for some people, an exciting side trip to Mount Whitney, complete with a lightning show. There were some agonizing days as novice and more experienced backpackers adjusted to carrying 50-pound packs, the high elevation, and each other. The scenery, of course, was breathtaking as we hiked past heavily glaciated high mountain peaks, through pine forests. Is this thing going ahead of me? There we go. Through pine forests and open meadows, and struggled to the tops of passes over 11,000 feet elevation. We watched marmots and pikas go about their business. Clark's nutcrackers tried to steal our food at every opportunity, along with ground squirrels and chipmunks, and bugs, and blisters. So we hiked and we explored, learning as much as we could about the natural environment that we were immersed in. We survived on the terrible backpacking food of the 70s and eagerly awaited every food drop where we got fresh vegetables. We studied the ecology, vegetation, and fauna of the Sierra and glacial geomorphology, which was always especially fascinating to me. I love geomorphology. I almost was a geologist. In addition to the common coursework on the ecology and geology, each student also developed an independent study project, and these varied widely. This is Marianne, actually, looking for lichens. We swam in cold mountain lakes and forded rushing streams. We celebrated birthdays. We met many other hikers and a few bears. We had days of rain, and we had days of beautiful weather. By the end, everybody was probably in the best physical shape of their lives. Once we reached the end of the trail, we all went off in different directions to write reports on the trip and on the students' individual projects. The experience was amazing, and it was different for every participant. I'm sure some remember the trip more fondly than others do. Living and trekking with 12 people for that length of time is never without its stresses, and we probably all learned as much about group dynamics as we did about science. But those 2 summers in the Sierra were among my most life-changing experiences. I went on to graduate school in ecology and a long career on vegetation dynamics, fire ecology, fire effects, which I've continued even into retirement. Well, after this first, I guess, reasonably successful venture, Antioch continued the program, initially with a different program each quarter. I served as coordinator to help organize several of the other early programs until I started graduate school at the University of California, Davis in 1972. Several of the participants in that original program went on to lead programs of their own over the next few years, including Marianne C., Chris Darling, and Dan Roby. The Mobile Field Center program transitioned into the environmental field program at some point. The last program, as Tom mentioned, was in 2003. So at least 45 programs over a 30-year run. Not bad. Peter Townsend will tell that story. Thank you.
I'm going to make it a brief story. As we've already heard, it began summer '71.
Peter,
Yes,
you're muted.
how do I unmute?
He's not muted. He's not muted. No, he's not. Go on the screen.
That feed is going to the stream.
Okay,
So it just needs to be on.
so the original concept, and some of you will remember, maybe many of you will remember, that in the late 60s and early 70s, it was common for students to invent classes and to teach the whole class themselves. And the original model was that the leaders would teach the whole 4 courses. Now, no faculty member would dare to try to teach 4 courses. Normally we taught 2, sometimes 3, but not 4 at the same time. And so here we had student leaders who were expected to teach 4 different courses. Well, that changed very rapidly. And the leaders figured out before the faculty did that they couldn't do that. And so the leaders rapidly began to change the model. And instead of being the faculty for 4 classes, they were the organizers for 4 classes. And they would work with the faculty on campus to develop a syllabus. The syllabus would then, every student leader, at least most of the student leaders, had a couple of months in the field before they ran their program. And in that period of time, they would select local experts to visit, and the local experts would present the curriculum. So they had a whole bunch of different faculty instead of 2 students trying to be faculty, and visited many different people with many different perspectives. So they went to coal mines, they went to factories. Of course, they went with environmental leaders from the area to get a perspective of a larger perspective of the environmental issues that they were studying. The programs went all over the place. The furthest were northern slope of Alaska and the Caribbean. And we had 2 trips to Alaska North Slope and 2 trips to the Caribbean. And of course, lots of trips in between. And the model was that the EFP would study the environment wherever they were focusing on. So in short, we ran, I think, 46, because in the 70s, we ran multiple EFPs a year. We ran 46 EFPs over 32 years, which that's pretty incredible for a program to be able to subsist for 32 years. And let me tell you, some of the Antioch faculty believed that field anything was crazy. And we fought those faculty members to keep the program alive for several generations of time. But we managed to do it until 2003, when the president and the dean of students decided that they would kill the program, and they did.
That was not me.
No, that was not you. You weren't there in 2003.
No, I was there up to 2002.
Yeah. So it was Rick Jurasek and Cheryl Keene. So
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, it's an amazing history. I'm going to speak for just a couple minutes here on following up from what Sue said about the first EFP. I was one of those 10 students And I definitely was in the best shape of my life afterwards. We came back here looking like marathon runners. And Peter reminded me, because he started actually in July of that year. So he saw us come back from this trip, and he said, we all scattered to the winds as soon as we could. So I guess we'd had enough of each other. But we had a very collaborative trip, and a lot of credit goes to Sue and Bob. They did an amazing job of doing, as Peter said, teaching the courses themselves, because we were off in the mountains the whole time. The organization they developed to make that work was really extraordinarily well done. And it was a great model, really, for the subsequent ones. But as he noted, subsequent ones also looked at additional resources, because it was a huge burden on the two leaders to try to cover all that coursework. It was really beyond our capacity, frankly, to do that for other areas. So I was on that trip, and I really got the bug about being out in the field to address academic interests. And I think that it's formed my whole life as an environmental scientist, frankly. It was of huge value to me. And I don't know what I would have done without it. I did change majors about 5 times in the first 2 years, and then ended up in environmental studies because of that field program. And I went on to lead one. And I'll just say briefly that did occur with, I think, several of the participants of different programs. They went on to lead a subsequent program. And when I say lead, I mean co-lead. The program that I co-led was the desert program of 73, spring of 73. I did a lot of work out there ahead of time, as did Mark Sondheim, who spent a year out there ahead of time as a geology student at University of Arizona. And Mark has since passed away, or he would have wanted to be here. But we involved a lot of local expertise. We didn't actually provide a syllabus. We were the hybrid group, I think, that developed a program that we just kind of implemented without the benefit of telling our faculty advisors like Peter and Bob Beery. But we told them, you know, as we developed it and came back to campus and told them how it went, and the students were able to get credit. They did some amazing work. And it was of great value to have been on one of these. But there's another person on the line here who both participated, and then, well, actually there's 2 who subsequently led programs. We'll hit one of them right now, and that's Guy Schumann. And Guy is also someone who was in the very early stages of the program as a participant. He was on Tom Herman's environmental field program, and he's going to say a few words about going from participant to leader and the value that was to him. Guy?
Thanks, Marianne. Everybody can hear me okay, I assume? Yeah, I was a participant with our 2 Toms, Tom Herman and Tom Louie, on the first one or the second one of the EFPs. And we covered a long area from the Atlantic coastal plain. We started in Chesapeake Bay and went all the way down to the Florida Keys. And my friend Bill McCormick, who became my co-leader for the second one, which we did 2 years later, we decided to narrow that scope and cover a smaller area and a little more fixed base, because with the first one I went on, similar to yours, Marianne, we traveled the whole time. And we felt it would be better to, have some more fixed bases. So we spent our first 2 weeks at the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography, studying geomorphology and beach movement. I worked there in between the 2 EFPs. I worked there at a co-op as my co-op with a marine geologist and a beach geologist, and learned a lot of the techniques. So we did a pretty good project there with core sampling and learning about how the beaches move and change over time. So we were there about 2 weeks, and then we went to Ossabaw Island, which is now a state park administered island, but at the time it was a pretty much natural coastal barrier island owned by a rich foundation. I can't remember the name exactly, but we stayed in a camp there with cabins. We lived in tree houses, and we spent 2 weeks studying the biology of the island. and we did a transect from the beach all the way through to the mature oak forest. So that was a pretty good project we did there, looking at everything in that transect from the beach through to the forest. After that, we did a 12-day canoe trip. We started in Okefenokee Swamp and traveled across Okefenokee and then down the Swanee River all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, which I had done when I worked at Skidaway. In between the two trips, I had gone there with one of my friends from there and loved it. I've been back there 3 times since. It's just a fabulous area. But that was a pretty amazing trip for 12 days down the river. And then we spent about 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks in central southern Florida, going to national parks, the Everglades, refuges. And then the last 2 weeks were in the Florida Keys at Pigeon Key, which is a research station, which doesn't exist. It's a historical site now, I believe, but it was a great little research station out on the Florida Keys where we did a lot of snorkeling and looking at the marine environment. Bob Beery came down for that at least part of that last 2 weeks. I don't remember how long, and joined us there. So it was a great experience for me. Both of the EFPs were great experiences. I guess I'd like to offer a perspective of someone who did not go on to become a scientist. I went on to become a wildland firefighter. I spent 25 years doing that. And a lot of the participants in our program, I would say kind of equally, some of them went on to become scientists, science majors. Others went on to do other things. One's, a musician and a few other things. And I think the whole EFP program was a great experience for not only people who are going to become scientists and have a rigorous academic program. It's just a great program for people who in their first couple of years of college, and the social experiment, the being outside, learning about the environment, it's just incredibly valuable, I think, to all of them. And the people from our program that I'm still in touch with, which, I lost touch for a long time, and then with Facebook, you get back in touch with people. Boy, almost every one of them said it was one of the best things they did at Antioch, which made me feel good because, as you get a little older, you say, yeah, I was just a kid then. I really didn't, I did some really stupid things. But almost 201, all of them really enjoyed the program and felt like they got a lot out of it. I think to a certain extent, as I know that Marianne mentioned that the new program might be led by faculty or maybe by students, but what we were basically then, as we look back on it, was kids leading kids. I mean, we weren't experts. You look back and you think about all the stupid things you did back then. But I think that gives two things. It's a little less rigorous academically, but it also gives a social environment where I think the students feel comfortable. They feel they're with their peers. They do a lot of things together, and I think it's a real growing experience for the students. So for me, both trips were fabulous. I was pretty amazed to hear, after being kind of out of touch with Antioch for many years, about how long the EFPs went and how many there were, and went back to some of the same places. And I see comments. There's a mailing list for EFPs, and I see people make comments about, going to the same places we went, and 10 years later, 12, 15 years later, and just it's amazing to see it continuing for so long. So I think it was a fabulous program.
Progress. Thank you very much. Jesse, I think you're. Yeah, you can fix that. So we are going in somewhat chronological order, so that we can kind of see how things went. Just go turn it off. Anyway, I did want to mention about the nature of what you're hearing. There was a lot of effort to try to minimize costs on these trips. And there was a lot of camping. There was a lot of use of field stations when they were available. And some, like the ones mentioned by Guy and mine as well, Antioch faculty came and joined us. Jim Howell and Warren Watson came and joined us. And we had a great time with them. And Jim Howell's ornithology was a huge addition to what we did out there. And Warren Watson's enthusiasm was a huge addition too, for those of you who knew Warren. So with that, we'll go to 73. and actually get a participant's view of, and actually multiple participants' views that have been put together by Emily Ecker. So Emily, go ahead.
Well, hi there. Okay. So this was 1973. I was part of the Deserts of the Southwest. It was organized and led by Marianne C. and Mark Sondheim. And there were 11 students. And I had a chance, I've stayed in touch with a lot of them. I had a chance to interview 7 of the alumni to get their reflections about our EFP. And I've broken this into 3 parts of my presentation. Why we think the EFP is very important, even if it is shortened. I will suggest that there can be some financial benefits to Antioch with the EFP. And we have some thoughts about how it can be revised. And my full speech goes over 5 minutes. So I'm going to read to help move this along. And I've combined people's quotes into one. And I'll email Marianne the full text that she can share with everybody. So echoing others, the environmental field program was a pivotal experience for everyone on this trip. Quote, I had many wonderful experiences in my 3 years at Antioch, but EFT stands above them all. Most of us on the EFP were not science majors, nor went on to being science majors, but we all agree on the value of the EFP experience. We learned lifelong skills, both in the sciences and social skills that we have used in our entire life. So the EFP experience, one of my cohorts said, the EFP concept fits well with the Antioch's philosophy of experiential education. And that's it in a nutshell. If you want to promote this, that's it. So our teachers spent many hours teaching us the hard sciences of botany, ecology, geology, and animal biology. The EFP experience was the first time we really got to see science in action. We met with a number of graduate students and professors who were doing their own research in the field. And then we had times to do that as well. The field science we learned benefited me in all aspects of the rest of our lives. Wherever I go, wherever I travel, so this is one person saying it, but I'd say it's true for everyone. I examine and question the interactions between humans and the landscape with nature. For example, with climate change, I live in Manhattan. The seawalls they are building around the area, I question whether they'll really work with the next Hurricane Sandy. So that's just one example. He's constantly comparing, and that started from our EFP. We also developed social skills. Most of the time we got along very well, but of course there were challenges, and we worked through them and became a cohesive group. We developed lifelong friendships. Personally, for me, they're my closest friendships, because when I was at Antioch, every quarter you never knew who was going to be there. I never bonded with anybody. I spent most of my time in that little Quaker chapel by myself. So this was incredible. One person said, I was shy and lacked confidence when I started Antioch. The small, close group dynamics of the EFP allowed me to open up and grow. So much so that she led an EFP the next year with one of our cohorts. Also, another example of how important, and we synced so closely, is we had a 30th year reunion at Capitol Reef, Utah. 7 of us, or maybe 9 of us, were there for that one. We Zoomed together for Mark Sondheim's memorial. And the reunion, our lifelong friendships, and our connection to Mark, all are testaments to the bonds that we created through the EFP. I mean, my closest friends are these Antioch cohort. So the financial benefits. Personally, after the EFP, I changed my major to environmental science. I had to stay another year to complete required courses and co-ops, which obviously my parents had to pay for. That money went to Antioch. But I also wondered if the EFP influenced people's desire to, as alumni, to give to Antioch. And in fact, the answer is yes. The EFP gave me an emotional connection to Antioch. Thus, I give an annual donation. Here's another quote. I donate to Antioch every year. I also give money to the Special Science Scholarship Fund for the last 4 years. I'm certain my experience with EFP was one of the reasons I contributed to Antioch. And if they resume the EFP program, it would be a further incentive for me to contribute. One friend on EFP I know gives a substantial amount every year, and she's on the Alumni Science Committee. So that's another thing you can be promoting. So the last area is future EFPs and our thoughts around that. For most of us, it's hard for us to think about a shorter EFP. Even 6 weeks but we do understand that even with 6 weeks, you would allow new students the benefit of such a unique and wonderful educational experience. And one person says, 6 weeks could actually work. In fact, I think 6 weeks would be good. It might take running the program easier for staff and students. Emphasis, make the EFT available to all students, not just science majors. Quality of the teachers is critical. Good leadership and instruction is very important. I heard that from everybody. And I also heard that some EFPs did not go well. The teachers were not good. I had one student I heard from, there was nothing going on in her EFP. So she and her friend marched down to the Alaskan or Washington, state of Washington coastline and got a job up on with the fishermen. You know, they made it for themselves. But Marianne and Mark were the best, absolute best. And they also knew how to handle group dynamics. So both things are really important. Number of students, our trip had 11 with 2 leaders. Probably Antioch has too few students at present to have such a large trip, but I think 6 students would still provide a critical mass. And finally, other topics can be taught besides sciences. Although our trip focused on hard sciences, an EFP could just as easily include historic, sociological, or economic factors. For example, a closer look at Indigenous or minority communities in the area, or a focus on healthcare in the area visited, or currents happening in local religious beliefs. So thank you. It was wonderful, and I sure hope that it starts up again.
Thank you, Emily. It's really marvelous that you talked to so many people to get all those comments consolidated. We want to, and sort again with sort of a chronological approach, we want to actually go to Lincoln Kern, who is calling in from Australia and was both a participant and a subsequent leader. So Lincoln, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Good day from winter in Melbourne. It's not very cold actually, but you can see I'm rugged up for the for being up at dawn, which I should say maybe EFP helped me like to get up at dawn because I still like getting up at dawn. So let me start with, well, I'll start with this idea when I did the EFP. I'll say first I did 2. So I was a participant on an EFP to the Pacific Northwest in 1983, and I led the EFP to the American Southwest in 1984. But at the time, it's an amazing idea. In hindsight, an EFP is an amazing idea, and for the future, it would be too. Basically, I can joke and say, you know, two or three student leaders, a couple of vans, 8 or 10 students, and go out there and talk to people and experience the place. It was amazing that we could do it in 1984, and it's amazing that we will consider it again. I'll throw a dad joke out there that on occasion we could have we actually in '84 we went over to Mexico. So we crossed the line, broke some rules. That'll be a surprise to some of you leaders out there, as if an EFP would break the rules. But we did, and had great fun. And ironically, Puerto Penasco means rocky. But we didn't hit the rocks. We came back to the United States and didn't get taken away at the time. But still an amazing idea to me. Even just last week, I was up in the Northern Territory canoeing in the equivalent of an EFP with my guide, Snowy. And he said his grandfather actually told him exactly what an EFP is to me. You should believe 50% of what you read, 75% of what you're told, and 100% of what you experience. And that's what EFP is. It's like, believe it because you experienced it. You were out in the environment, you were speaking to people, etc. Now, the other premise, I haven't really heard this from others, but what I learned out of EFP, to me, it was based on going to talk to people, sometimes academics, but in both my EFPs, we talk to all kinds of people all the time. Ranchers, people who worked in museums, people who worked for energy companies, and that was it. It's an amazing power to say to someone, please tell me about your life, your studies, the place you live, what makes you happy. And it's amazing how they open up. You don't even have to pay them. You just ask them to tell them about their life, and they love it. So, and I continued that. So that method of learning too, from people. When I came to Australia, I had to learn about a whole new environment, and I tell you that was, and I had to do it in an arid place too. And it's just a great way of learning, of just asking people to tell yourself about them. And that's, I started an environmental consultancy and basically had to ask people to tell me about important environmental and ecology issues. And EFP helped me do that. Now, in the Northwest EFP, I'll go in a bit more, in the Northwest, we met a lot of Native Americans, and it still goes through my mind. One of them told me about an anthropological study. I'm not sure if it's quite BS, but that somehow the study indicated that Native Americans were not, as were perceived, maybe beers, like they just meditated out in the environment. They were doers. And this is a Native American told me that. And I've learned, it's reverberated with me ever since, because it's actually a really important idea. And even I've been doing work with indigenous people in Australia, and they say the same thing. We're responsible for our land. We manage it. We're doers. They don't quite put it that way, but they put the first half that way. But the end is they're just really engaged with their environment. And if nothing else, I learned that what the dominant culture perceives about certain groups of people isn't true. You got to ask them what's true. So also, so in the 84 EFP, I learned quite a few. Being a leader is so much more, it takes so much more thinking and effort and so on. So you get to go out twice too, or we did at least. One thing I learned a great deal about was geology. And to this day, I still go, if you got to learn about the rocks, then you got to learn about the plants on top of them. And once you know about geology and plants, and understand how to analyze that, the environment tells you what's going on. It's the basis of understanding everything else that's going on in the environment. Now, one experience I had in Santa Fe on my trip that has influenced me ever since is we met an old rancher who said, he bluntly said, you know, all you environmentalists, you don't get that sometimes the way environmentalists deal with issues is critiquing the whole person, not critiquing their whole life. So if you tell a rancher that they're wrecking the environment, in a way it's condemning their life, not their practices. And ever since then, I still think of that old man when I try to deal with farmers or people who might be perceived as hostile to environmental management. But if speaking to that person made me think, you got to think about how people feel. And And nowadays, in the last 10 years in Australia in my work, a lot more people are talking about, well, conservation is about people. And I knew that a long time ago in the EFP, that it taught me that. But now a lot of other people are saying the same thing. So I think my 5 minutes are about up and almost over. I learned a lot more too. I would like to say I'm still sleeping on the ground. I slept on the ground a whole summer through the EFP. I can still sleep on the ground and be happy. The other thing I'd like to say is give some praise Jim Howe. Unfortunately, he did die on a plane crash in Antarctica, and I just went to Antarctica in February and thought a lot about him and Bob Berry as I was on the ship. Even the cruise I was on wasn't like an EFP. We had lots of speakers who weren't academics, who were just talking about the passions of their life. And so in memory of Jim Howe and Bob Berry as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lincoln. That was very inspiring. And thank you so much for joining us at whatever it is, 4 in the morning or something. Is it 4 in the morning? More or less. Anyway.
6:30, but 6:30, it's all right.
Well, it's early and we really appreciate your effort doing that. Our last sort of testimonial and personal account is going to come from another later EFP, one in 1990 from Joe Youngkin. So Joe, take it away.
Hello. Let's see. I think, okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, fantastic. One of the participants in Lincoln's EFP, Kevin Everhart, went on to lead an EFP in 1987, which I applied and got in. And that I found that was like a huge highlight of my my Antioch experience. At that point, I was very accustomed to traveling and living outside at that point, and camping a lot at that point in my career. But the whole learning in the field and was a fantastic. It sounded very exciting to me. And Kevin and Cindy, who they're still together today, and we're still in contact, led a program to Florida and what I guess northern or southern Georgia and Florida, and we spent the summer camping out there, and that took a lot of adaptation due to the heat and the humidity and bugs so thick. They used to call it fur thick, where enough mosquitoes land on your arm that it looks like you have fur. We had a great time there. I'll just go over some highlights of that EFP, but we met some authors of books that we used at Antioch, like Eugene Odom and his son Howard Odom. Both were inspirational to me. We took, there was a lot of outdoor time. We did canoe trips on crystal rivers, and we were out on a sailboat with the Marine Science Under Sails. A guy named Ned Webster took us out, and we did marine ecology, snorkeling trips, and some basics of learning to sail, which was fantastic. I can just say that the being a participant, I had so much fun on that. I just wanted to do it again, and that definitely it went. So it was such an interesting trip. It's one of those times in life when you said, "Wow, I think I could do that." So anyway, I applied. It took a couple applications before I got in. And I did learn, I'd say one of the big lessons is that sometimes it's easier to think you can do something than do it. And it took a lot more work than I thought to lead one versus to be a participant. I've learned that lesson over and over, it seems. anyway, I co-led with a Clark branch, and we did the Snake and Columbia River basins in the Pacific Northwest. And we put together, we were the facilitators. I'll just go over a couple things we hadn't covered. It was like a three, for us, the co-leaders, it was 3 quarters it took for us to, including, I guess, 1 quarter to write an application while you're a student and then get it accepted among competing applications. Then there was a quarter of a development trip where the school would actually fund us in 1 van to go and we follow our proposal and meet people in the field. You know, we'd call ahead of time. So we had, and we'd call on the road, and we'd go out and explore and go from camp to camp, area to area, and basically put together an itinerary for our trip with all the people. We called them field facilitators. And that was that I'd say it was another highlight of leading. We learned so much because we had to meet with probably and go to 2 or 3 times as many places as we actually had time to do. We set up wilderness trips and all kinds of plant tours and that kind of thing. Our courses included industrial processes of the Pacific Northwest, and that included like a tour, walking and driving tour through a 1,000-acre Alcoa aluminum plant along the Columbia River. We went and saw sugar beet processing and kind of followed whenever we did one of these industrial plants. We followed a flow diagram of resources and energy in and products coming out. And so we'd kind of study that, go look for it in real life, talk to our facilitator about it, or our field expert about it. We were the facilitator. And then, and basically everyone would write up their own flow diagram for that resource and processing. We also studied natural resources, and that took us kind of on a wilderness trip along the Columbia River through the Hanford base, which is kind of the last wild part of it, which was fascinating. And we did a cultural resources course where we met some of the native tribes there. We met some authors, old populist author named J.W. Smith. We met with groups, nonprofits and activist groups like the Hanford Downwinders, and we got involved and learned a lot about some of the environmental issues in the Pacific Northwest. Just to, I guess, I know for the people that even on our original EFP were many of us are still in contact, and we've had reunions besides this school reunion, probably 5 or 6 years back. We used to have our own reunions periodically, and it's really great to still be in contact with the people that we had that experience in. It's definitely many of us feel like it was it was a big impact on our life. Some parts of it were hard, some were easy, some were wonderful, but no matter, everyone has a story about how, that is a highlight of a time period really in our lives. For me, I got a real knackering for travel and work and kind of expedition like travel. So my career went on to working with scientists and facilitating science groups in Antarctica, Greenland, and Alaska for about up until around 2015, and then on. Now I'm living in the Pacific Northwest, and we have a small farm here. But I really felt like at the time that EFP was just beginning, that this was the future of education. And I'm kind of I know there were schools that were started up to do it, and I thought it was happening, but I haven't seen much of it. Education stayed pretty much very similar as my kids now are in college age. Education's very similar to the way it was when I was in college, surprisingly similar. And I really think there is a giant opportunity to getting back into the field outdoor learning experiences. And the environmental field program was a great attempt at that. And I hope we can progress it forward.
Thank you, Joe. That's a really helpful set of comments. Well, those of you in the room have heard a lot of different comments today that relate to the value, both by the participants and really the whole educational program here over the years that it ran. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tom Herman to talk a little bit more about some ideas about where we could look at helping Antioch envision some form of this kind of experiential education that would be appropriate now with the kind of students we have now and the kind of constraints we have now. So I will turn it over to Tom.
Thanks, Marianne. That's great. Listen, I just want to thank all the previous speakers for sharing your experiences and your wisdom and obvious impacts that EFP has had on your lives. I think you'd agree that we've gained a really valuable, perspective on EFP, an idea that was born, and I think it's important to think about this. This idea was born at an exciting time in the emergence of environmental studies as a serious and respected academic pursuit. At the time, there were few integrated programs that explored boundaries and connections between disciplines. Of course, we've known for a long time that boundaries are inherently interesting. I think most Antiochians are drawn to boundaries and spend an inordinate amount of time trying to cross them. But seriously, I think boundaries are where the action takes place across scales from subcellular to planetary, and the actions generate connections. So we're not just drawn to boundaries by curiosity, we're now drawn to them for planetary survival. So environmental studies is it's no longer solely an integrated academic discipline. It's becoming a way of knowing, to Lincoln's point, I think, and a way of living. In the day, EFP was at the very heart of environmental studies. It was built on the exploration of boundaries and connections. And while we've just described and celebrated EFP's birth and evolution, its maturation and senescence, perhaps like Antioch itself, reports of its death have been greatly exaggerated. Would EFP or some manifestation of it have a place in today's, or even more importantly, in tomorrow's Antioch? A program that was designed and executed largely by student initiative and labor on a shoestring budget, addressing the critical problems of the time and predicting the emerging problems of the future. A program that developed in leaders and participants alike confidence, initiative, leadership, compassion, tolerance, and collaboration. Imagine that. Could such a program still have a place? What would it look like? What could it look like? The concept, and I think this is the important piece, it's not that this is carved in stone, that there is one right EFP or one right design for EFP. I think from what we've heard today, it's obvious that there are many potential designs and approaches. I think the concept is obviously transferable across scales, and I mean that it could be more spatially constrained, some of the original EFPs were quite broad in scope, in scale, but it could run in a much smaller space. It could run for shorter or longer periods. It could be used to recruit new and transfer students. It could be a community engagement tool. It could engage alumni as participants or mentors. I mean, the possibilities are nearly endless. And it could even provide an income stream. It could make money. Now, as an educator, I am drawn to the idea for the way it has built and the way it's shaped lives, honed critical thinking skills, launched careers, and how it could engage and transform a community. As a former academic administrator, I appreciate the constraints, both in cost recovery and also in quality assurance. Both of those items are front and center in today's higher education world, and particularly in Antioch's world. With the emergence of the new interdisciplinary focus of Antioch's academic plan, imagine that, an interdisciplinary focus at Antioch. Back to the future. With sustainability and environment as one of the key pillars of this new academic plan, and the growing integration of classroom, co-op, and community, it would seem an appropriate time, at least for a conversation about EFP. And perhaps EFP is not dead, perhaps it's only in diapause, or it's been hibernating. So I think at this point, we could open the conversation to the larger group and address some of these challenges around how we could adapt the program to today's Antioch and to the constraints that it presently faces. And I think there are a couple pieces that have been brought up that I think are really worth pursuing. One is to look at the role that alumni might play, either as participants in some kind of program, but also what role it could play in funding. And the other thing is I'd really like to have some discussion around the timing component, because Antioch students today are different and they face different constraints, and they have different kinds of lives than those from 40, 30, even 20 years ago. And one of the pieces I think that's really we need to consider is the constraints of students who are working while they're studying, and many of today's Antioch students are working. Can we design, is there a design for a program that might be experiential and built around integrated interdisciplinary pursuits that could accommodate the schedules of students who are working? And that might mean we need to reimagine the concept of the EFP, which I think in many of our minds has always been this large block of time where you go off to some remote and extraordinary location. What was accomplished in those EFPs, I think, could also be accomplished in very different EFPs that are done closer to home and on very shorter timescales, or perhaps, with designed around weekends even. There are many institutions that design things around weekends. So, rather than weekend warriors, you might think about weekend environmentalists. Anyway, just a few thoughts to open the discussion. And I think, Marianne, you're going to manage that discussion since you're in the room and I'm not.
Yeah, thank you, Tom.
Very much.
We have a, and thank you for your thoughts and stimulating ideas, which I hope we can pursue here. We have some great minds in the room and a lot of experience in the room as well. We also have a microphone, so if you'll raise your hand, the person in the back will come running over with the microphone and you can ask your question. Here's one right here.
So way back when, from a member of the class of 1973, there was an institution called the Great Lakes College Association. And some of the many programs were done with a limited number of students from, I don't know, 5 or 6 different colleges in the area. I know the program that I participated in, studying Spanish and culture in Bogota, Colombia, we had students from half a dozen different places, 2 of us from Antioch, and there were maybe 30 students. So I'm just saying all the students don't necessarily have to be Antioch students. This is another consideration.
That's a very good point, and one that has a lot of merit, that the GLCA has done wonders with those programs. Another question back here? There's one over there.
Follow up on the.
Wait till the mic so that we can get it on the recording. And Kim Landsberger couldn't be here with us today. She's going to listen to this whole thing when she's back. She's an important part of this picture as an environmental professor here. So go ahead.
Follow up on Lisa's question now. People know most of the federal grants in science go to graduate students and professors and graduate students. Have people thought about partnering with a graduate school in the region and participating in submitting grant proposals that way?
That's a good question. Peter, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm so unplugged from
Okay.
current academic stuff.
He says he's unplugged from these things at the moment, but it certainly is something that could be pursued. And anyone on the panel want to speak to that? Tom?
Yeah, I
We
only
don't,
heard.
we couldn't hear it. We couldn't
Yeah.
hear the question.
Oh, okay. The question was about partnering with institutions, graduate programs, schools, other schools have, where grants may be more likely to land, where we could be involved with them as partners.
I think that's an excellent idea and has all kinds of potential. And back to the earlier comment about piggybacking on regional networks, educational networks, to draw students from a number of institutions. There's no reason why this couldn't be coordinated or integrated with research programs out of a larger university or consortia of universities. There are so many consortia right now that are doing integrated research that it's much easier now than it used to be to coordinate those efforts. And of course, because of the scale of the problems that we face, the only way we're going to tackle these are with these enormous think tanks and community and community science initiatives, and all of those things require the coordination across multiple agencies and so on. There's no reason why an EFP program couldn't be linked into one such network. So I think it's a great idea.
And for those who don't know, Tom Herman is a past president of Acadia University in Nova Scotia, and he's speaking to us from Canada, but he has great experience with university issues elsewhere. So his perspective is very, very helpful in this. Yes, we've got a question right down here.
Just responding to the question about grant opportunities. I don't know whether you're aware of our EU program at the National Science Foundation. This is research experiences for undergraduates, and going on for many decades. And one can get grants for undergraduate educational experiences. Now, most of the grants that I'm familiar with go to people in laboratories who are coordinating laboratory research with their students, faculty members, and students in a laboratory. But the outdoors is also a laboratory. And I would think that REU grants, which are for undergraduates, would be a better source. And I've had a lot of experience with the National Science Foundation.
And we appreciate that. Can you participants hear that question? Okay, good. I didn't want to repeat it if you could hear it. So there's another one here coming up.
Thanks. I'm in listening mode, but just a quick factual item that might be interesting in response to Joan. We had one of our students who participated in NSF REU this past year, Emma Sue Jones, who spent a co-op term. And we're thinking of co-op as very expansive in the shapes that it can take now that it is embedded in the credit-bearing curriculum. Emma Sue Jones spent a term in Bermuda studying coral reefs at an NSF-funded lab that incorporated many of these immersive and self-directed transformative experiences that I'm hearing about today. So that's one of the forms that these experiences can look like today.
Yeah, that's very helpful information. There's a question in the back or a comment in the back. And we're appreciating these ideas, and these are all very helpful to looking at how something could move forward.
I found the afternoon very interesting. I wish there was that program when I was here. I think that part of a liberal arts education, it should be open to any major changes in the sciences. My other question is, the time is at 5:30 now. Where is the Roosevelt Circle? The gym.
Louisa Beer can help you there on that one. And actually, I think Peter might correct me, but I don't recall any restrictions on what majors anybody had.
Oh, no.
And no, EFPs were open to anybody. And as was noted, many of the students were not science majors when they were on it, and they didn't necessarily become science majors. So it was always a very open opportunity. Yeah.
And in fact,
Oh,
is this active?
if not, come over here.
Point it over here like this.
I can't.
We've got a different one coming.
Oh, all right. Peter's going to comment here.
So, most of the students who participated in EFPs were non-science majors. And we designed them so that they covered a variety of topics. Frequently, we had a journalism focus. We had a variety of social science foci. So we had faculty advisors from across the institution, and students participating from across the institution.
Well, and in fact, Carl Molly got involved with some of the later EFPs to help with group dynamics. And he was with our physical education program. So yeah, there were a lot of different angles on these. It wasn't just natural sciences. Other ideas? Oh, there's one right there.
Check.
Oh, what? Somebody.
It just occurred to me in terms of bringing something like this back, starting small is better than big. And there are these 2-month small segments in the current academic calendar. Might be a way to fit things in.
Yes, the idea of small segments is one reason some of the participants who are aware of the current calendar, we're talking about 6 weeks or less, because there are some of those kinds of periods already in the current calendar. And there's a hand up in the back.
All right, I like that, that 2 week, 2 months. That's an idea. I also wanted to say is, I'm formerly with the Army Corps of Engineers, and we have a huge civil works program across the entire country. And if you contacted, I'm sure, any of the district colonels, I know up in New York, there's some fabulous stuff. They welcome a program sponsored by Antioch College, possibly to give them right away and access into a number of like our wetland areas, all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure the engineers at the Corps would be happy, if they needed to speak or talk about. Anyway, that's just an easy, free resource.
Yeah, about partnership idea. Yeah, that's a good one. Partners could be very critical because that could help raise money as well as contribute academically to what the students could gain from it. Other ideas or comments?
Could I
Can
say
I-
something?
Oh.
Could I say something?
Yes,
And then me.
Go ahead.
And then me, please.
Okay. As far as starting small, of course that makes sense. But what I'm learning in the fundraising world is sometimes it's easier to get a grant if you've got a big idea and a big proposal than something small.
Yeah,
That's all.
Susan had her hand up.
All right.
Susan had her hand up.
Oh, yeah.
I did
Susan,
try.
too.
I tried to
Susan.
have my hand up.
Yeah.
Can I jump in for a second?
No, go ahead.
So one of the things that I've been thinking about as this conversation's going around is that there's a big emphasis in a lot of areas on citizen science projects. And I think there's a fair amount of funding in that arena. I don't know the details of it. Tom might know better than I do because I'm not writing grant proposals anymore. I kind of gave up on that a few years ago. But that's a way of getting funded projects and bringing together groups of students who might be, it could even go over a year that you're collecting some kind of environmental data or some other kind of data that's part of a project that you're contributing to. So that's one idea. And I also wanted to just follow up on Peter's comment that even in the early EFPs, actually before they were called EFPs, there was some considerable social content. And one, I think it was the third one, was the one in the Appalachians that John Kinney ran, and they did a lot of cultural stuff. They built musical instruments. They hung out with musicians, and they talked to people up in the hollers in the Appalachians to learn about the culture. So it was very diverse. They weren't just science ones even from the beginning. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good point. There were a number of social science elements or even major focus points in some of the EFPs that we didn't talk about directly. One thing that Tom mentioned about sustainability and adaptation, those can be buzzwords sometimes in different kind of funding scenarios, grant proposals, and studying topics that can lead to a better understanding of sustainability and adaptation and so on to the pressures of the current world. It could be an attractive way to get at some grant support. And I see a question in the back. Yeah, go ahead, Louisa.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to introduce myself, Louisa Beery, she, her, hers, and I'm now the Dean of Co-op here at Antioch, the granddaughter of Bob Beery. It is so good to see you all on the screen and all of you who are here in the room. I was attending an earlier meeting as you all were planning for this panel, and it's just wonderful to see how it's turned out. I wanted to say hi to Lincoln across the continent and the ocean, and thank you again, Lincoln, for hosting some of our co-op students there at Practical Ecology in Australia. I'm really, it's great to see you all, and I'm happy that we're continuing some of these traditions in all kinds of ways. And it's really wonderful to hear your ideas today. We're excited to have you. I had a very short 10-day trip with a student who led a new student orientation. It was an outdoor orientation for new students who arrived to Antioch, and they arrived about a week and a half early so we could go backpacking through the Wayne National Forest right here in Ohio, just in southern Ohio. That was a few years back, and it was student-led, and there was about 11 or 12 of us, plus my son, in our backpacks. So it felt like in the spirit of EFP, because I got to attend, not the EFPs per se, but some of those wonderful canoe trips with my grandpa back in the day. And so I just want you all to know that some of these traditions are still alive and well. And for those of you who are not on campus, we miss you. But for those of you who are here, check out the Arts and Science Building and say hello to all of us while you're on campus. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. It's really important to have you here and hear your interest in this. And it reminds me that a number of us up on screen here were beneficiaries of Bob Beery's long weekend trips to the Everglades or the Great Lakes or wherever it was that he decided we should all go. And we'd hop in the van and go for, however long we could get time to go. And so those short trip things really do make a difference. I think that model is something that's doable and might be a good way to focus on one element of something that could go forward. Are there other comments? We have we've had very, very good input here, and we're all very grateful for that. And we hope to ask for your continuing interest and involvement. If you want to discuss any of this further, please see me or Peter after we disband here. And with that, and I also want to thank everybody on screen. You folks have been so great to help us with this today, across from Canada to Australia and all the areas in between. Thank you so much for your input.
Don't forget Jesse.
And Jesse right here, thank you. And with that, we'll conclude this. Thanks very, very much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Jesse.